Hey everyone, sorry there. Had to reboot my computer. Technical difficulties.
Right there. Okay. Why don't we wait a little bit because I think there were people trying to get on and I got a couple text messages. How's everyone?
Good. Lois is good.
Great. And yourself?
Oh, doing all right. We're doing just fine here.
Good.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Sue.
Hello. Sure.
Hey gang, Robin here.
Shirley, I miss sitting next to you and seeing all the photographs of your grandchildren you always show me.
Oh, you're so sweet. Are you in
Having
town,
withdrawal from them.
Susan? Are you in town?
What?
Are you in town? Are you back in town?
Not yet. No, I'm away right this week.
Okay. Keeping safe?
Yes. How about you?
Fine.
We'll all be so happy to see each other.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Carter, did you see there was a message from Michael?
No, I didn't see.
I just flashed up. Maybe it's in
Yeah.
chat.
I go
Yeah.
I go through the attendees periodically. So
Convert me to a panelist, please.
I'm not even a rabbi. How can I do that?
He asked me. Oh no, I jumped in. You're right. He didn't. He asked you, Cormac.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're ready to start. I think we have a quorum. Mar sent me a text saying that she was gonna be a little late. So I think we could start. I think Carter is Jacob. I don't have the list of people that are, attendees, but I believe that Jacob and, let's just see here. Kendall Jacobson. Yeah. Legislative Director for Brad Holman should be there somewhere.
yeah, I think they're both panelists now. If you're in the gallery view, you should be able to see them.
Okay, I see Jacob and I see Kendall. All right, so let me start out tonight. For people who don't know me, my name is Bob Ely. I am a co-chair of the State Liquor Authority Licensing Committee at Committee Board 2. I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. What we will be reviewing is a bill that we reviewed last month and we're continuing to review. We have folks from Brad Holman's office here. I think we're going to start with them, at least to ask questions. That is Jacob Riley and Kendall Jacobson. And we will then, if there are people that would like to speak on the bill as it is currently written and would like to make comment, we'll give everybody an opportunity. Everybody will get a chance to speak. And then we will provide some discussion among ourselves about the bill. And we'll go over things that were suggested at the full board meeting last month. And I guess our goal tonight is really to try to come up with solutions and some ideas and some feedback with regards to what we have in front of us. There is some indication. I'll let Senator Holman's office explain where they are, at least in terms of the bill. And without any further ado, I think I'll hand the car keys over to Jacob and Kendall. If you guys would like to say something to start out with, I'll let you do that. But of course, we're going to have questions for you guys as well.
Great. Thanks so much, first of all, for having us both on. I really appreciate your time, and we appreciate all the feedback we've received on the legislation so far. So first, why don't I just give an update again. I'm Kendall Jacobson. I'm Senator Hoylman's legislative director. And as you all may know, and it seems like, we've certainly had a lot of discussions, back and forth on this, over the past month or two. Senator Hoylman originally introduced this legislation, in response to the really dire struggles of, restaurants and bars in, our district and across the city and across the state, thanks to the pandemic and the shutdowns that, they were required to go through. So we're seeing that, these to-go alcohol sales have been a lifeline for a lot of restaurants, but at the same time, we also, wanted to make sure that those were being done responsibly and in a way that, doesn't bring a host of negative impacts to the community. So the original proposal, which, is the bill in its current form, it was a 2-year extension of the ability for bars and restaurants to sell alcohol for off-premises consumption. That to-go authorization came with a series of stipulations and considerations, including the need to regularly consult with community boards and municipalities for their input on the implementation of the law. And a requirement that beverages be sold in closed or sealed containers accompanied by the purchase of food. I would essentially describe it as an extension of the governor's current executive order with a lot more community input requirements built in. Since then, of course, we've been gathering a lot of feedback from all of our community boards, our constituents, and I think over the last couple of weeks, we've seen some really concerning instances where folks have not been practicing proper social distancing, have been violating open container laws, and really, in our office, public health comes first. We definitely want to help out bars and restaurants where we can, but I think we are very concerned, about the instances we've seen of, folks not using to-go privileges responsibly, and we've been considering a number of different ways to address, those concerns and, strengthen the bill. Or, as some of you may have seen, Senator Hoylman put out a statement a few weeks ago expressing his concern about those social distancing violations, and also saying that he is considering a number of different measures, including, either striking the bill entirely or, allowing only delivery in New York City and, not to-go sales, or a number of methods to make the bill stricter and require more care be placed on to-go sales. So I'm here to listen. I'm here to, assess the feedback from you guys on, what you've seen in the community and your concerns or questions that you may have, and to answer anything I can, and, try and be responsive and helpful as we go forward in that process. Because I think we want to, find a way forward that helps our bars and restaurants, but also make sure that the community is safe. So with that, unless Jacob has any other additions, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Jacob, do you have anything you would like to say?
Nothing to say. I think Kendall summed it up pretty well.
Okay, great. I appreciate that, Kendall. Very well said. And I think I will just open up to the committee if anybody on the committee has any questions about the process, with regards to the bill. And then we'll go to, after that, then we'll go on to people who are from the public that would like to speak. And then we'll go back to more questioning, okay? So if you have any questions specific to the procedure and the process of the bill and how it works, I think that would be a good start. So I see a few hands raised, and let's just see here. Bear with me, guys. There we go. Okay. So Susan Wittenberg, you have a question? I'm sorry. You don't.
I do, Bob. But I wanted to make sure it fit what you just said. And if it doesn't, we can delay it till later. But
Go ahead.
The question I thought pertained to process was, how do you deal with something where we've only gotten negative input from the community? I mean, this is separate from our own feelings about supporting the bars and restaurants. So this is a big statement to us. And I didn't know whether you had found that from other communities as well, and how that impacts the process of the stipulations in the bill.
You know, I think though we have heard, I think the feedback we have heard from the community has varied based on the type of neighborhoods that the community board represents. And I think, you know, this area in particular is a bit more residential and has a lot of folks that, you know, are seeing, I think some of the, you know, we've talked about hotspots, right? So across the city, there are certain areas which seem to have more concerns. And I think this is one of them where we're seeing, you know, some more concerning signs here. So I would say
I understand that. So that's how I wondered how you dealt with neighborhoods that don't fit the generalization.
Right. You know, I think that's where we start to consider ways that we can require more, you know, enforcement and target that enforcement to hotspots. So, you know, we're in conversations right now about ways in which the bill could be strengthened as far as enforcement provisions, ways to limit the possibility that someone could, you know, walk out with an open container and drink it on the street. Maybe requirements about sealed containers or prohibiting drinks from being sold with straws. You know, requiring signage to be posted outside of businesses, reminding patrons of their obligation to follow the law. We have a lot of things we're considering at the moment, but it would be targeted. I think the key is working with, you know, partners in state and local government to make sure that enforcement is, you know, coming to the areas who need it most.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so when I was talking about process, what I was really talking about is how does the legislative process occur, at least in terms of how do we create this bill? Where does it come from? And so I guess, you know, my question, Mr. Jacobson, is where is this bill coming from? Is there certain interests that behind the bill? Are there people who are pressing for this bill? This is something that is fairly new, and who are the groups? So if there are special interest groups, who are the people that behind the bill that are really pushing the bill forward?
Thanks for that question. You know, I would say that it's not necessarily a matter of special interest groups as so much as it is that we've heard directly from so many restaurant owners and bar owners in the senator's districts that are, you know, reinforcing over and over again that this is one of the only things keeping them afloat right now. So I think the concern and the reason that we introduced the legislation was because, you know, we're very cognizant of the fact that, you know, some of these establishments are so unique and make up the local character of the community, and it would be horrible to lose them. So, you know, the senator, I think his main goal was to preserve the ability of those folks to keep their businesses, to stay alive. You know, and of course, the organizations that traditionally support the interests of restaurants and bars are supportive of this legislation, you know, because they're trying to help their members stay alive. So that's who's supporting it in general, I would say, as far as interest groups.
And I would just add that we've heard from restaurant owners and their associations, and they seem very open to ways of strengthening the bill in enforcement and different ways that the community can supply input. So they've been very open to amending the bill. And so that's why we're also interested in hearing feedback tonight.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you,
That's a great point, Jacob. I think, you know, restaurant owners have actually been really vocal about the desire to have more enforcement. You know, I think that they, you know, feel that all they're trying to do is stay alive right now, and they want help to make sure that, you know, folks are following the law.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to call on Cormac Flynn. Mr. Flynn, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, no, because we were doing process questions. And I want to make sure that I understood. So the point is right now, since the bill is currently, you guys are reconsidering revising the bill, you're not looking for us to take a position on it so much as to sort of charrette and collect and put in, you know, what we've heard from the community, and you're collecting community input and feedback, right?
I don't, you know, it's not my prerogative, I think, to tell you whether you can take a position or not, certainly, but like I definitely, you know, I think we're looking for feedback, and we're always open to, you know, what you are hearing on the ground and what you want to see out of the legislation. That's very important. So yeah, I think right now we're looking for feedback. If you know, it's certainly your prerogative whether you want to take a position.
Right, and I just, Kendall, if you weren't, I don't remember if you were here at the last meeting. I think we did hear from members of the public at that time about it. You might want to listen to that. I know we have the tape, and I'm sure that if they haven't already, you know, Donna and Bob can send you some of the stuff we've gotten by email.
Yeah, I reviewed a lot of the feedback from that meeting, and we've heard from those constituents individually as well. So we're definitely very aware of it.
I have another process question, but I'm not going to abuse my time. I'll let somebody else go. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question from Lois. Go ahead, Lois.
Yes, this is about process. Does the Assembly have a counterpart bill regarding this issue?
Yes, so the companion bill in the Assembly is carried by Assemblywoman Pat Fahey, who is from Albany. So she's an upstate member. You know, I think we wanted to get, you know, viewpoints from all areas of the state. So she carries the
Do you have the Assembly number, or you can give it to us another time?
Yeah, the Assembly bill number is A10550.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I think just on process as well, I think this will be helpful. Currently, as some of you may know, the to-go authorization is because the governor has issued executive orders and has been periodically extending them. So, you know, he recently extended the to-go order for another 30 days, which will take us to the end of July.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Smith?
Yes. Thank you for coming, Kendall and Jacob, and wanting to know what we're hearing from the ground. Basically, what I'm hearing from neighbors and from people in the neighborhood is that they want no part of the bill.
Are you done, Dr. Smith?
Yes. Did you hear me, Jacob and Kendall?
The last thing I heard was that your neighbors want no part of the bill. Was there anything else?
That's it. But if they had to have something, they would only want takeout. I mean, delivered to the house, to the home.
Understood. Thank you for that.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Hey Bob, before we get too far, I mean, just there are 4 parts of the bill, pretty much, right, that I can identify. There
Yes.
is delivery, there is takeout, there is packaging, and there's what can be sold. And would you characterize that as the 4 rough areas, Kendall, of what?
I mean, there's also a lot of community input requirements as well. So that's
Okay,
another
right.
part of the bill.
Community, right. But those are the 4 main areas. And I think that the main objections that we've really been hearing are on the to-go portion of it. But there's significant input, I think, that the board can offer on those other areas as well. And so I think it can be a given that all of the communication that we've received is against the to-go provision, just so we don't spend too much time reiterating that. And we can talk about some of the other aspects of this that would be helpful so that we can help ensure that this is a better bill if it does in fact move forward. So does that sound right, Bob?
Yeah, no, that's fine, Carter. It's just, I think if there are questions about how the bill operates and how does it go through, I just wanted to get those out early on. And then I really do want to I think, you know, I can't see how many people are here, but I would like to get, I'm sure there are people that would like to speak. And I just thought it would be best to do that first and then go back to the nuts and bolts of the 4 sections that you're talking about. I really do.
I agree. I
do really want to give people an opportunity to speak, and then we can move on. But in terms of the process, is there anybody else that has questions with regards to the process of the bill? Mr. Levine, you have a question?
Do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I
let
do
me
have a
go with
question.
Michael Levine first, okay? Katie?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Bob, and thank you for the representatives who are here from the State Senator's office. I have a question about the operation of the bill. If an establishment currently has an on-premises license, do they automatically qualify for the provisions for takeout, et cetera? Do they have to file something separate? And if they don't have an on-premises license, what is the filing procedure like? I think that's not clear to me and perhaps to some others. It would be helpful for us in determining what our role as a community board would be. So if we could take a moment or two to just explain in the bill, what would the difference be for being able to take advantage of the 4 different parts of the legislation if you have an on-premises license already, and if you don't, what would be the process to follow for filing? And what are we talking about in terms of a time frame? Would this take us into October, which may be quite after the current problems we're experiencing now? Sounds like a complicated question, but I think you could answer it pretty easily. And again, thank you for being here today.
Sorry about that. Of course, thank you for your question. I appreciate that. So the answer is actually pretty simple to that question. It's any alcoholic beverage that a licensee is currently allowed to sell for on-premises consumption pursuant to their current license, they would be allowed to sell for off-premises consumption as well. So takeout, delivery, right now under the current framework of the bill, if you're allowed to sell the drink to drink in your establishment, you're allowed to sell it for off-premises consumption as well. There's no application process that's required for that, but in order to be able to do that, you have to have a liquor license, for and then you're only allowed to sell what you're currently allowed to sell by your license. And I think you asked a question about the time frame. The bill would extend for 2 years after the end of the state of emergency declaration. So whenever that declaration ends, there's a 2-year time frame through which this would be allowed. And I should flag that, we've heard some significant feedback from community members that is a pretty long period of time. And one of the things we're considering is shortening that time frame.
Okay, thank you very much for your comprehensive answer. We appreciate this as background information.
Now, if there's somebody that is still not on mute, there's some background noise with somebody that has not muted themselves. So if you could just check to make sure that you're muted if you're not being called upon, I would appreciate that. Next up, Katie, do you have a question on process?
I do. It's a little bit different from Michael's, but it might seem the same. It's maybe a little more political. What does your office predict, Kendall, of when the executive orders might stop being implemented? It's another 30 days. Do you think that's going to continue? And that puts us into the time frame of trying to figure out what the time frame is for the bill to go forward.
That's a good question with a difficult answer. I think the governor has been historically over the past couple months has shown that he's willing to wait up until pretty much the last minute to extend executive orders, and I think he's assessing the situation in the local communities pretty much constantly. So when all that overcrowding on St. Mark's, happened, not only did Senator Hoylman put out a statement, but I think the governor tweeted, "Don't make me come down there," so he's very aware of it. And I think it's hard to predict. I think it really depends on how folks behave. So, if people have shown that they can't, use this responsibly, I think, he'll take a look at, some either restricted form of it or not extending it. But up until this point, he's extended it because, bars and restaurants really have made the case that this is a crucial lifeline for them.
Thank you.
Now, I had a follow-up question. So I guess from my vantage point, is the bill that's being proposed a law designed for the ABC or the Alcohol Beverage and Control Act? In other words, I'm looking at this law as one that has to do with the delivery or the takeout or the service of alcohol. I think it's pretty obvious that the liquor authority plays every role, at least in terms of the promulgation of that particular new law, the law that you guys are proposing. It also seems to me that there are probably other agencies or other parts of government that would also, play a role. At least, I always think of, well, you have the liquor authority, and then there's enforcement by the liquor authority, but the liquor authority enforcement can only be, is really limited in what it can do. And then you have enforcement outside agencies, so that would be, the police or so I guess, I understand the bill is a Senate bill, but have you guys thought about that? Have you thought about, those two factors? In other words, we may have multiple agencies that involved in this particular law, and will the state liquor authority, how is the state liquor authority going to control everything that's involved here?
Absolutely. We're getting a little technical here, but in the bill itself, it gives the authority to promulgate rules and regulations to implement the act to the state liquor authority, first of all. So they have some flexibility to respond to situations that maybe aren't contemplated by the bill. But as you alluded to, there's a complicated layer of enforcement, both at the state and local level. So the SLA is responsible for enforcing it. Department of Health at both the state and local level might be responsible for, enforcing some of the social distancing, aspects as we go forward. The mayor's office of nightlife, will be responsible for ensuring compliance. And as you alluded to, the police department is responsible in large part for enforcement of the open container laws. Though we, of course, do want to be sensitive to concerns about over-policing. So I think, it's a balancing act, and we're currently identifying some ways that we can encourage coordination and community input and, community enforcement without, being too over the top about it, or, bringing undue police presence into local communities. So definitely something we're thinking very hard about.
I appreciate that. So I'm going to open it up. I think that there are members of the public that would like to speak. And if you would, you need to raise your hand at this point, and I can call on you. And we'll, if you could do your best to not say what someone has said before you, and if you could try to get to the point as quickly as you can, and we're not going to sit here and time you, but I will limit things if they go on too long, okay? So if you could raise your hand again, I would appreciate it, and I'll start calling on people. Okay, so I see Laura Tenenbaum. Laura, are you brought forward?
I'm here. You had to call me first. I waited not to be called first. I just raised my hand this moment. But anyway, thank you.
I apologize, Laura, but there's no way for me to actually tell who raised their hand first, because I don't have that screen in front of me until the very end.
It's all right. Now this goes beyond process, or are we still discussing just process?
No, we're not. We're off process. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
We're off process, and
Okay.
now any you folks want to make comment, you're more than welcome to do so.
All right.
Okay?
I did want to comment. I'm one of those people who are really opposed to this. Our community is overwhelmed and has been overwhelmed already with way too many liquor licenses issued just because people have had to make the rent before the pandemic. Very, very often the sales of liquor, the income from that goes straight to the landlord. And that's been the case for a long time. It's gotten worse, and I feel terrible for the restaurateurs who are dying out there and their employees. However, I think it is a public health crisis to be able to allow takeout. Delivery, I have some other issues with it. I'm not, thinking about who the clients or patrons of that will be, but I'm not going to go there. I do want to talk a little bit about an email that I did send to the board about problems with enforcement of just the sidewalk cafes right now, not even takeout. I took a walk one day in my neighborhood on Petrosino Square. Not only did I see people drinking beer in the park out of a carry-out container, which relates directly to this issue, but I also saw a lot of infractions I had only about 2 feet of walking space on the sidewalk because of the way that the tables and chairs were set out along the curb on the sidewalk. I made complaints to, I went to the website on the, on 311, and I followed the links, and I ended up making complaints to, 2 complaints to special enforcement, 2 complaints that went to special enforcement, and 2 complaints that went to Department of Consumer Affairs. Both of them basically wrote back saying, not my problem, I'm not the agency. And I was at a complete loss. Until the city gets in place a way to really handle true complaints about real problems, this isn't going to work at all. Another issue, you say, go to the police. Well, the police have literally told people in my community that that even wearing a mask is a quality of life problem, and they have been told not to take care of quality of life problems. So we're at a standstill here. It's a great law if people behaved in a neighborly way, but they don't. And that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Ms. Tenenbaum.
Thank you.
I have Zella Jones. Ms. Jones, would you like to say something?
There I am. I'm unmuted. I'm not going to waste your time with my deep-seated concerns regarding enforcement here. We don't have enforcement on open streets. They're abrogating it to local community leaders who have to fight with somebody who doesn't want to wear a mask, and you can't call a policeman, and that part is absolutely absurd. We've in some ways compromised the police. I don't disagree with reallocating their authority personally, but this is stepping right into the hornet's nest as far as enforcement goes. And we all know, and this board knows, that the state liquor authority doesn't have enough personnel to possibly deal with enforcement. And I've got to send a video that's time framed. I have to send pictures. I have to send annotated descriptions that are certified before the state liquor authority can do anything. That takes months. It takes months. So I forget the enforcement part of this. That's totally unreasonable in this bill. There isn't going to be any enforcement. There isn't any reasonable enforcement that my dear Senator Brad Hoylman can possibly put together to make this right. As regards home delivery, I certainly hope that there isn't takeout. That's a big problem, and it's been well talked about. The take-home part of it is when I order something from my local liquor store, I have to prove that I am of an age that it would be allowed to sell an alcoholic beverage. So unless there is something in this bill that requires that every restaurant is keyed into the motor vehicle department to verify somebody's age, this isn't even an improvement. Anything can be delivered to an address, and there is no guarantee that someone under the age of 18 or some party with a lot of folks who are under the age of 18 are not going to have it. At the same time, I would love to order something from Lafayette Bakery and Grill with a glass of wine that goes with it. I'm not opposed to something that is reasonable, but what we've got for flagrant violations right now are a lot of people who are trying to party because they just desperately need to party, and it ain't me. So I hope that you will address those issues in some way that is responsible. One third point, it seems to me that for the cost of ordering a cocktail from a restaurant, and if it's coming to your house, you're paying 2 to 3 times more than what you would pay to pour it from the bottle that you purchased from your package store. So I'm not seeing what the benefit is here. There isn't other than a cosmetic. Order your pina colada with your burrito, I'm not seeing the advantage overall, and I'm not seeing, and that's from a restaurant's point of view. I don't think that this is a moneymaker for them in that light. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Mr.
Yeah.
Hope, Augustine Hope, you want to come forward?
Yeah, can I respond real quick to that?
Yes, you may. Go ahead.
I just wanted to let you know, and thank you for that question. The bill requires drinks to be delivered only to recipients' homes if they are over the age of 21. And one of the things we're considering is fleshing out that requirement a little bit more to potentially require ID checks both at the point of sale and at the point of delivery. So we're very concerned about making sure that underage folks aren't getting delivered alcohol. So I just wanted to thank you for that, for pointing that out. And please, email us if you have suggestions about that.
And I'm going to follow up on that later on, okay? So next up is Mr. Hope. Would you like to say something?
I would indeed. Kendall, I think, Kendall, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, Kendall, I think you've been copied on a number of emails that have been going around recently.
Yeah.
And I think you probably understand by now that the community as a whole in the West Village, at least, think this is quite frankly, a nonsense bill. And the reason comes down to the question that none of you guys can really answer, which is enforcement. There's only two possible options with enforcement. There's the nuclear option, which happened to Whitehorse today, where they get suspended or shut down, and there's no other option. So anybody that doesn't reach the level of Whitehorse, nothing happens to them, nothing at all. And this has been true for 10 years, and it's going to be true for the next 10 years as well. However you write this bill, there is nobody to enforce it. So what happens is you have a takeaway law. People don't take anything away. Right now, outside my house, there are people with open containers right under my window drinking. Nobody's going to do anything about that. They don't go when you say grab and go. If you do delivery, these restaurants, and I'm not saying all of them, but some of them are going to deliver to the other side of the sidewalk. How do you police that? So today, I'm walking along the street, right? And I get into a conversation with Upright, which is right next to me. And it turns into a heated conversation. He's upset. The manager is upset about something I said to him a couple of days ago in the heat of the moment. What do you know? He tells me that he's going to teach me to respect people. So he calls the police. The police come, right? And he makes his complaint, and I say, can I talk to you? And we talk about it, and I say, explain how I'm so frustrated because we've all been complaining for a month now, and nobody's come, and nobody's dealt with any of these issues. And then I say, and this policeman says, he understands our frustration, but what can he do? The mayor has told him not to deal with any of these issues. He's not going to deal with the open container issues. They're selling. I have pictures, multiple pictures of these guys selling open container drinks to their clientele on the street, right under my window. There is nothing at all that you guys can do to enforce this, literally. Please tell me what it is you could possibly do that has not been done and why it hasn't been done over the last 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hope. I'd like to call on the next person if that's okay. Ms. Quinn, Catherine Quinn.
Yes, hello, thank you. I'll be very quick. Of course, I agree with Mr. Hope and the earlier speakers. There's no possibility of enforcement. I would like to follow up on Dr. Smith's question. I think that we have established here tonight and earlier that virtually every residential occupant of Senator Hoylman's district is opposed to this. And so my question is, because you have informed us, gentlemen, that it is owners or operators of restaurants who are pushing for this, can you tell me how many of them live in Senator Hoylman's district? I believe it's a very small number.
Okay.
So respectfully, we very much value the feedback we're getting right now from everyone here. I would dispute a little bit the contention that every single resident of our district is against this bill. I think we've, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we've heard varied feedback from different areas of our district on this, and we have heard from folks that are supportive of this as well. So not to say, we take every concern raised very seriously, and we are considering whether it's appropriate to move forward with this bill. But it is not a unanimous opposition that we've seen. I don't have exact figures on how many restaurant owners, live in our district. I do know that, they are valued parts of our community, and we want to keep them alive and their businesses alive and their employees employed if we can. So that was our intent behind the bill.
But not voters. They're not voters in Senator.
Ms. Quinn,
Yes.
Quinn, if we don't want to go back and forth, but if you have a specific question, like your last one,
Thank you.
I think we can entertain that.
Thank you very much. I'm done.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Lori Kleinman. Ms. Kleinman? You have to unmute yourself, Ms. Kleinman.
Thank you.
There you go.
I just want to reiterate that I agree with all the other speakers about the concerns about enforcement. One thing that I have thought about is the issue of accountability, and in terms of enforcement, I don't know whether there's a legal issue here, but is there a way that the principals of these organizations can be held personally accountable, like be fined for infractions to this, so that there is some kind of incentive for them not to let their employees take advantage of this? That's my one question. Thank you.
Okay, so Ms. Kleinman, the question really is what kind of enforcement can occur against the licensees? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, and what would it be that they, in other words, you're saying how does it get enforced against them?
Personally
Okay.
against them.
Right, but what is the infraction? In other words, what is it that people are doing that it could be enforced that you're seeking?
The same kind of infractions that everybody's been talking about, not asking their people to move along, not making sure they're the right age, all of the other issues that everybody has already, showed concerns over.
And thank you. I think I can address that. So one of the governor's recent executive orders on this issue required restaurant owners and bar owners to monitor and inspect the area within 100 feet of their premises for violations of social distancing and open container law. So right now, under that executive order, owners are responsible for ensuring that people are complying with the law in front of their establishments, and they can face penalties if they don't do that. So that's an existing responsibility, and that's something we're also considering for inclusion in our legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kleinman. Next up is Nancy Paisley.
Thank you, Bob. I want to go back to the legislation in front of us. It's my understanding that it would take effect after the current emergency is over. And at that point, presumably all of the restaurants and bars would be, well, let me go back and say, I'm one of the people that has complained, and I've actually talked to the senator about this. I understand that this has come from good intentions, the good intentions of wanting to preserve local businesses, which most of us do patronize, at least some of them. But I think we all know what road is paved with good intentions, and I think this is possibly a good example of it. Once the emergency is over and everyone is back to the kind of operations they had before, where they can serve indoors at full capacity, I fail to see any need for this. I can see, in principle, a need for cutting these places a little slack at the present time, and I think we have every reason to anticipate that the governor will continue to extend the executive order. until such time as the emergency is over, unless there's enough bad behavior by the restaurants and bars to make him change his mind. And I can only speak to our neighborhood. I hear anecdotally that it may be different upstate, but here in the West Village, it is a disaster in simple terms. There was one establishment that it was shut down yesterday with great fanfare, and well deserved in my opinion, but it is one of, I've lost count. Certainly that on Hudson Street, it's terrible. On 7th Avenue, it's terrible. I hear it's terrible. In other parts of Manhattan and even Queens. And there is no enforcement. The idea of continuing this is just anathema to me. Now, I don't share my friend Augustine's problems with possible issues of takeout, of delivery. It's my understanding that you can call a liquor store and have them deliver without you being on the premises, and that there are some elaborate provisions to ensure, for one thing, that there are no underage sales. And I would think if this were to be parallel, that would go a long way to answer that question. But the real issue here is public health and convenience, which home delivery is not, I think, is not going to affect. If people take home delivery and sit on their stoop and drink beer, they can do that anyway with beer from the deli. So I would urge you that the idea of takeout, which has morphed instantly into hang around and have a party, is just a very bad idea that ought to be ended sooner rather than later, and certainly not extended after the present emergency is over. And thank you for your attention, and I want you to thank the senator for me. He was very polite and listened to what I said, but he did not make any promises. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paisley. Darlene Lutz. Ms. Lutz, would you like to say something?
Hi, Bob. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for this topic being rolled over. As most of you know on the panel, except for, I believe, Senator Hoyman's people, I live in Senator Kavanaugh's district, which is at the south end of Soho. And I'm just going to pipe in going, I have an outdoor party bar that has hundreds of people here for the last 2 years. I can tell you all about enforcement. Ask me anything. It is, I'm exhausted already. I don't know how much longer I can hang on. That premise has been open for 8 days, and I have the rest of the to endure. And I worked hard for 2 years trying to get what was in the stipulations enforced, and succeeded ever so slightly. So when this bill, when I read what's in this bill and listen to, like, well, how are people going to behave? We already know how people are going to behave. They aren't. They aren't. This is, and there is no enforcement because nothing matters right now. So, you know, it's, residents need, you know, we who are here or sticking it out here really need some quality of life. And we're not getting any assistance from our electeds, which, by the way, I can't get one on the line, and from any other area. So it's, and I was like, a show of hands of who on that panel drinks alcohol. I was like, the next meeting about alcohol, I think everybody should be drinking, everybody, and we'll see how everybody is reacting at the end. people get loud, obnoxious, loud music. It's unbearable to live with every single day when you can't leave the party. And that's all that's going on down here in every neighborhood around here where there's alcohol being served. So I personally don't care if every restaurant fails at this point. I mean, we have in Soho, the cupping room, which was a stalwart, is closed.
Ms.
We're
Klutz,
good.
what we're really focused in on tonight has to do with the bill. So if you could just try to focus in on the bill, that would be much appreciated.
Okay, well, I'm completely against the bill. There's no need for it. None.
I think we got your points.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
And now I've lost, give me a second here, sorry. Okay, I have Susan Ginsburg.
Okay.
Go ahead, Susan.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for giving us this opportunity to talk about this bill. I have, besides the same concerns that everybody else has expressed here about the West Village, is that I don't know whether, Mr. Jacobson, you know about all the underage drinking that's going on. No one is being carded. Yes, in your bill, you'll say they're to be carded. And it's obvious. They'll say there's some young kids and somebody goes up, no carding, and they bring back 6 drinks at a time. And you can see these tables outside are just filled with empty containers. Look, we know that even in the bars, there's underage drinking, but we don't have to deal with it as a community. Well, we do, except that we don't have to see it all the time with these parties on the street. I'm just saying that it's a huge problem. And there is no enforcement. You say that the bar owner, the restaurant owner is supposed to patrol and send people 100 feet away. So there is nothing. They don't ask people to separate 6 feet. The tables aren't even 6 feet apart if they have a restaurant outside. And look, they take up parking places from the DOT they'll use 2 storefronts for their tables, for their bars. And not knowing, they say they don't know that, or I'm wrong, there is no enforcement. The greed, it's become greedy. And I'm really concerned about the underage drinking, and it's obvious. It's obvious the kids laugh about it. Oh, yeah, I'm 21. They're 16. There's no way to enforce it. There's just no way unless you have a policeman, which they're not going to do it either. It's a very concerning problem about New York City in general and enforcement. And I don't know what can be done about it. That's what I wanted to add besides what everybody else has said about the problems. But the other thing is that the liquor stores are complaining. There's liquor stores on 7th Avenue South. There's one of them that we go to, and they said that their business is cut because everybody comes and just drinks outside. Nobody comes in and buys a bottle of wine anymore. So, we have to think of saving every business, and it's not up to us who live here to save the bars. I just don't think that's appropriate. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ginsburg. I have Ms. Clark, Leslie Clark.
Mute. Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Okay. I'm going to just endorse what my neighbors have said and add that I find it incredible that Mr. Jacobson refers to instances of there being parties and drinking on the street. You're talking about every day under my windows. Every day. The only difference between one day and another is the number. On the evening of Friday, June 19th, which was when when Senator Hoylman actually came to visit, I stopped counting at 100 people. 100 at the corner of West 4th and West 10th. To the best of my knowledge, none of these places people have been fined. The idea, I find it incredible that anyone would think that since the police will not enforce Municipal Code 10-125, which makes it illegal to drink in public. The police refuse to do that. The State Liquor Authority does not have any interest in going after anybody but the worst possible offenders. The idea that a backup to that is to make the owners responsible for going after their own customers. You can't be serious. This is not a serious way of enforcing what is general law breaking under our windows every night. And although it's gotten somewhat better with the open restaurants, last night when I came home, people were, as they approached the 11 o'clock hour, were ordering their takeaway drinks and then just walking across the street and finding a bench to have their nightcaps under my windows again for another hour. This is not a tenable way to help an industry. To put neighbors at risk, as we are at risk nightly, with this kind of behavior, unmasked throngs of people. And I'd like to also just point out that in my building, only half the tenants are here. I think in the village as a whole, there's many, many fewer people than normal. What's going to happen when they start coming back? There are very few tourists now. During the 2 years that Senator Hoylman wants to wreak further havoc on our neighborhood, there are going to be tourists here. The universities and colleges are not in session. What's going to happen during those 2 years when they're back in session? I shudder to think of what's going to be happening under our windows. And finally, I just think, I find it incredible that I have to repeat an email and phone call and Zoom call after another that this is actually illegal. It's actually illegal. And my state senator wants to continue something that is actually illegal for 2 more years. I think you should strike the bill entirely. I think that the resolution that the SLA committee wrote last month was a good one, and that if you can't strike it entirely, that you should limit it to delivery with the conditions that this committee suggested last month. Thank you for hearing me.
Bob, you're muted.
Bob, you're muted.
I'm going to bring Pete up, Pete Davies.
Yeah, thank you. Jacob and Kendall, thank you both for being here. I am not in Brad's district, but I do appreciate his attention to this. I think if you're going to consider takeaway, you need to have a marker on the container that identifies the selling premises, something like that, so that can be tracked. Maybe that's for delivery as well. So anything that leaves the premises, if it ends up in a park bench, you know where it came from. I want to point out something that Mr. Sugarman of the White Horse said after he got his license stripped. He said, they want me to police that people aren't standing 6 feet apart. I don't have the right to physically pull people apart. I can offer them a mask. Beyond that, I cannot be the social distancing police. Well, yes, he can, because the governor said he is. So I think that when you look at operators, and maybe he's just the worst, but I don't think there are many operators that are like, oh, good, I get to govern how people that buy booze and leave my place behave. If they won't do that, self-police, then we know the enforcement isn't there. So there's a problem there. In the chat, I put a story up about yesterday, a bad enforcement situation that happened where DOB sent out an inspector where there were clear violations of placement of tables on the sidewalk based on the guidelines. And the DOB inspector told us, oh no, the new rules say they can put tables wherever they want. And we said, no, 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 you can't block a standpipe, you can't block a door. Oh yes, they can. They can put the tables wherever they want. So these are the people being paid by our tax dollars to enforce who don't know the rules and are failing to enforce right now. So that's a problem. That pretty much covers it. I just don't see how this works. And so I'm in opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. I'm going to call on Elizabeth Sabo. I'd like to have her called back up if we could.
Hi, can you hear me?
Got you now. Go ahead, Ms. Sabo.
Hi, thank you, Bob. Hi. I'm not going to echo some wonderful, articulate comments made by our fellow residents and Block associations. I'm not going to address that lack of enforcement problem that we've always had. But what I just want to add and just stay micro-focused on is that we are in a pandemic. We may be entering phase 3, soon to be entering phase 4, but we are still in a pandemic. And it is, it's as if everybody's pretending like, well, we don't want it to be and we need to solve these problems, which are true. These are very big problems. But the biggest problem to me and the people I speak to in my area is the pandemic. That period, end of sentence. We need to socially distance. We need to wear masks. We need to stay home unless we don't need to be home still. So it seems that there's a certain casualness or turning the other way from that central point. This is a very, very serious situation we're in. And while, yes, we want restaurants to somehow survive, we want businesses to somehow survive. What is more important than any of that is that human beings survive. So I am adamantly against this bill. I also spoke with the senator and he shared with me that he was horrified with what was happening. And I just hope that if it proceeds, that it remains at takeout only for now. Maybe with consideration in, look at it again. Or maybe there are some 3 strikes you're out kind of thing that are really actually possible. I don't know. But at this time, I don't see enforcement is at all possible. So please remember the key word in all of this is pandemic, pandemic, pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think that is everybody that would like to speak, at least from the attendees. I'll just check one more time, but that's it. And I'm gonna, I think Carter had a good idea, at least in trying to figure out various areas of the bill that we could discuss and ask questions about. And I think that's where we should be headed next. If there's other questions that the committee have which don't fit into those categories, feel free to ask, obviously. Okay. But I guess I'll open it up with the packaging of the drinks, or at least that portion of the bill, and I'll open up questions to folks on that subject. And I guess Mr. Jacobson, if what are your thoughts, at least in terms of the packaging and how that relates to either enforcement or how the takeout or delivery will occur?
Thank you. And first, I just want to thank everybody who spoke about the bill. We really appreciate your feedback, and it's the reason we're here, is to hear this. And specifically, I want to address the point that we're in a pandemic. As I said at the top of the call, public health comes first for us. Absolutely. Before anything else, public health comes first. And that's why the senator came out with the statement he did. And that's why it's a very real consideration for our office to strike this bill or to limit it to delivery only in the city. And none of the things we talk about tonight, as far as, steps we could take to, make the bill stricter, preclude that. That's a very real option for us. So I do want you to know we hear you, and thank you for speaking about it. As to the packaging, so the bill currently requires drinks to be sold in any closed or sealed container of any size, and accompanied by the purchase of food. That's pretty much it for packaging requirements. And the reason for that is because it's consistent with the governor's executive order, and that's the way we drafted it a month and a half ago. So since then, I think we've come to realize that that's probably insufficient. And, you know, we're considering some steps to, I think, New Jersey's law, and I believe also California's, require drinks to be sealed in a sealed container. And, you know, some concerns from liquor stores and wine stores were mentioned as well. I think we're also considering size limitations on the drinks as well. So, you know, maybe a sealed container of no more than, you know, the size you would get for you know, one drink, one glass of wine would be the limitation. And I thought the idea about, you know, individual markers for each establishment was interesting. You know, we'll certainly take that back to the senator and we'll consider that as well. But I think that's one area where we see a lot of room for improvement is, you know, making sure someone can't just carry out an open container and, you know, have someone trust that they're going to take it home. I think that, you know, it should be a sealed container.
And then in terms of the individual markings on the container, I mean, at least it could be traced. So, I mean, to a certain extent, the tracing of where it's coming from does, you know, if the particular container is not being produced correctly and not being sold correctly, at least in terms of it being a closed container, then, you know, that is something that could be enforced at the state liquor authority. If somebody, you know, if there's a marking on the particular container itself. Okay, I'll open up the questions.
I just wanted to add in, because, you know, we had talked about this extensively. It should also have an ingredient list that should say that it's an alcoholic beverage, so that it can be enforced by any law enforcement, as far as like any open container, just like any can of beer or anything. It says who made it, the distributor. The liquor authority has extensive regulations on posting who created each, you know, drink as far as from a manufacturer. So I think that the spirit of that should be continued, because essentially what the businesses are becoming manufacturers of individual drinks. And so those individual drinks should have, I would think, all the appropriate labeling, especially if it's delivered from somebody in a way that, you know, it hasn't been tampered with from this point of origin to when a customer gets it. I mean, there's a lot of health issues in here, because it's the to-go especially is a very interesting model going forward. You know, I mean, that's certainly so and then I also think for the drinks, it's, you know, one of the big issues and right now that I see is people are drifting into is pre-mixing, which is basically creating cocktails prior to their being ordered in larger quantities. And the to-go, or not so much the to-go, but the delivery, you know, raises a lot of concerns with respect to that, in that, you know, a business could pre-manufacture all these drinks, put them in the refrigerator, and that's a significant element of the ABC law is pre-mixing. And so there's a lot of conflict with certain elements, I guess, in the packaging and how that happens that should be clarified, because you're really introducing an entirely new opportunity here. And this is the chance to really start it off right after the pandemic, I guess, is over. But correct me if I'm wrong, this is when the governor's order ceases, not when the pandemic is over. Is that?
Yeah, correct. There's, you know, it's technically splitting some hairs, but the bill takes effect immediately. So the community input provisions and requirements would take effect immediately. And we wanted to do that to make sure that the SLA was immediately required to consult with community boards. But it expires 2 years after the end of the state of emergency declaration. And, you know, the reason why we did that in the first place was because we anticipated that folks would still be pretty cautious about, you know, being in public places even after the state of emergency restrictions ended. But as I said, I think we recognize that 2 years is a really long time, and you know, we're taking a look at shortening that as well. On the ingredient labeling, you know, I think where that gets tricky is for cocktails. You know, I think especially like part of the unique thing about, you know, taking away a drink or having it delivered is getting your favorite cocktail from your favorite bar, and it would be a pretty significant requirement on a restaurant to have to label individual ingredients for every single one of their cocktails. But to your point, I think, you know, having a label that says this is alcohol would be helpful.
That's the key.
And I would also say, you know, in terms of the safety aspect of it, I mean, it's like anything that's enclosed, you know, anybody can open it and slip something into it. And, you know, I guess that's my concern. The law kind of says pretty much any container or any sealed container. And I get worried that someone opens it up, you know, I think of, I hate to say it, but I think of, you know, my kids, and it's like somebody puts a pill into the drink and then they hand it to my daughter or something like that. You know, I mean, I get worried about the fact that the container itself is, you know, it does seem to me that something, I mean, we have containers. So if you buy a beer at the store, it's, you know, it's obviously, you know, that situation taken care of, but it does seem like that mixed drinks is more susceptible because it's not being manufactured and put into, you know, delivered and then put in a refrigerator then purchased. A mixed drink is actually, you know, is a mixture, and it's being made by a person, and then, you know, then there's all sorts of other people that are involved in the delivery of it, and that makes me a little nervous. That's all. So it just seems to me that the packaging of the container and is really, really important for this particular bill. And so to explain to everybody, if you could, how if someone was to take out a drink pursuant to this bill, right? The bartender would have to make the drink, and then so how does that work? How does actually someone leave the bar or the restaurant with the drink? I'm saying grab. This is grab and go.
Yeah, the bill isn't prescriptive about that. I think that would be something that would be covered by SLA regulations, but you know, I think the intent is to, it depends on what restrictions are in place through the governor's executive orders. So, you know, I think, you know, depending on what stage we've been in and reopening, you know, people haven't even been allowed inside the restaurants, you know, and still are not allowed inside for indoor dining. So I think the expectation would be that it's you know, either some sort of socially distanced line to pick up a drink, or, you know, that you pick up the drink outside the restaurant at a table, or you know, there's a takeout window, or some situation where folks are not encouraged to stay and they need to be able to leave. But the specifics of that are not contemplated, you know, in the bill. I think that's something that would be addressed by SLA regulation. And I want to mention too, on the you know, sealed container requirements, Jacob mentioned earlier that restaurants have been very open to, you know, strengthening the bill. And that's one of the areas in which I think we heard, hey, look, if that, you know, if that's what it takes to make this work, then we're very open to it. So restaurant owners have been, the ones we've been speaking to are extremely receptive to that kind of idea.
Okay, I have a question from Mr. Flynn. Cormac, go ahead.
Hi, I actually just wanted to continue. I don't have a question now. I just was going to want to continue on the container conversation we were having. So a few months back, we approved a liquor license for the movie theater over on 14th Street and Broadway, or 13th and Broadway. And one of the things that they were going to do in order to make it easier for them to enforce liquor within the theater was that liquor was served in a distinctive container that was a different color, looked nothing like any other drink that is served, and was clear and obvious, so that when you walked around in the theaters and things, you could see right there, that's liquor, that's liquor, that's liquor, to make enforcement easier. And something like that, to the extent that there is going to be enforcement, which is problematic, but I don't want to hijack this conversation, we can talk about that later. You know, that seems to me that would simplify. The other thing I want to say about packaging is, I mean, look, the ideal would be, in that sense, something like a growler station, right? In which, you know, not that you brought your own bottles, but when you left, it was, you know, those things were fairly substantially capped and sealed. It wasn't just like, you know, tear it off, right? It's fairly substantially. I understand there might be an economic problem for that for the providers, but it's worth looking into something more substantial like that. Because the other end, what you end up getting, is, for instance, like in Louisiana, you get a Solo cup or a McDonald's style shake cup with a little plastic lid, and it's not open, it's sealed in the sense that they put the straw across it in a little piece of Scotch tape. And I mean, that is problematic in all kinds of ways. And I really think that the more distinctive we can make the packaging and the more robust we can make it so that it isn't just a stick to straw in and drink on the street, but it's like cap, I got to take it off later at home. That's just going to give us a better chance to try to mitigate things. So.
Thank you. And to be clear, when I say sealed, I was talking about substantively, difficult to open, like you're talking about. I think we're very concerned about the idea of just, a lid, and I think we're even considering, banning the sale of drinks with straws. I think that in itself is encouraging folks to drink them on the walk home, and we'd be concerned about that. And as far as the theater, like the unique color rule, that's something that was brought up by one of the restaurant owners on a call we had as well. So I think they're open to that kind of idea as well, and that's something we could explore.
I also have another question from William Benish. Mr. Benish?
Yes, thanks, Bob. And Cormac, you actually made a lot of the points that I was going to raise. The only thing I would add is, is it possible to even further clarify, the definition of a sealed container to perhaps exclude even a screw top container? So could you say something like it has to be either a traditional bottle cap or a cork, something that would require like an extra tool to actually open? Obviously people could still bring their own tools, but it makes it more difficult to just open it there on the street. So maybe something like a wine bottle with a cork where you need a corkscrew, or a traditional bottle cap where you actually need the external bottle opener to open it.
Yeah, certainly happy to take that into consideration. I think our goal would be to have any, a kind of vessel where it's apparent that someone broke the seal. So, you can have screw top bottles that still, it's easy to tell when the seal is actually broken on them. But, we're happy to, we're considering all our options at this point. So happy to take that under advisement.
Okay. I have other questions here. I'm just going to open up the questions for different areas and not just on packaging. So I got Mar Fitzgerald. Mar, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, it was on packaging though, so let's move on.
No, that's okay. We can stay there if you'd like.
Okay,
I'm just saying I'm opening it up to everything. That's on.
Quick suggestion or question, have you guys considered like those foil or foam breakaway seals, like if you buy alcohol or peroxide that you have to punch to open, and no cap at all, because if somebody opens it on the street and we had the identifiable bottle and the seal actually, the message was on the seal that says, for home consumption, violators will be prosecuted. That would be pretty much every sign you need to say, maybe this wouldn't be a good idea to open this right now. Just an idea.
And just following up on Mar, you see that on bubble tea, down in Chinatown a lot, where they put that's the only place I've seen it. I'm sure other people do it too, but they put that sealing plastic right over the top in the same way. So technology exists.
And I would just follow up with the container's got to say, you can't drink this out on the street. I mean, there are warning labels on containers, and one could be you're not allowed to do that. Or make it very clear. The problem is, of course, someone could just take that container, open it up, and then pour it into something else. In any event, I'm not sure that solves the question or solves the issue. But Susan Kent, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Now I'm unmuted. 2 points. First, with regards to containers, I think it's very important that the containers, whatever you use, be single portion containers. You don't want these huge drinks that really are actually multiple drinks. They, if it's a glass of wine, then it really should be like a 6-ounce serving, or it's a beer, it's a 12-ounce beer. Or even if it's a mixed drink. But the idea that you could be having these huge, like 7-Eleven super slurpy cups is really just encouraging large scale drinking. So that aspect of it being individual, single size servings to control it. The second which is to go to the idea of enforcement, which is clearly an overriding issue, and to offer a suggestion. We have auxiliary police. These are volunteer people, but they are trained people. Why can't they be, or at least some of them, specifically purposed to this kind of enforcement? I mean, they're there right now. Maybe they can receive extra training, but these are the kind of people that can be called and show up right away. And because of their, position, they represent, some sort of an authority that's documenting things, even if they are not allowed to issue summonses in and of themselves. But we should be thinking about utilizing these kind of resources, because if we do not get, enforcement and safety under control, this is really becoming, almost a wasted conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so one just follow up on what Susan was saying. The one thing that the single portion containers, also it's shots. So in other words, someone could just buy shots of Bacardi rum, for example. And so that particular container, if that's 12 ounces, that's why, again, identifying the package, what's in there, is it alcohol? What type of alcohol is in there? Sometimes it seems pretty critical, especially if someone wants to enforce something, if it could be enforced. How do they know it's alcohol? They're not going to know it's alcohol unless it's labeled. And I guess my fear is the shots of Bacardi rum and things of that sort to go. So I have. Go ahead, Kendall.
Yeah, we're very much contemplating a size requirement. I think that's something that we've heard a lot of feedback on, is that there would need to be some sort of size restriction. Listen, I'm sure there's going to be people who are ordering shots for delivery to have with their meal or to go or something, but I wonder who those people are, and why they would have enjoyment out of getting a tiny little shot delivered to their house. But yeah, I think we've seen mostly it's been cocktails and wine, but it's certainly a great point that, especially to go, we certainly don't want people getting large quantities of just straight liquor.
Yeah, I guess I envision the cheap shots being advertised. I also envision this particular platform, the to-go platform, to be a whole new form of competition. In other words, it's a new platform for business. And I don't want to go as far as the Amazon effect, but it is a completely new platform that people could take advantage of, and that could take away from other platforms where there's alcohol sales. And I guess it's the advertising, like the happy hour type of thing, where we're advertising shots to go cheaply, just like people advertise beer and other things to college students, generally speaking. But anyway, I'm taking up too much time here. I got Robin Rothstein. Go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, this is not on container specific.
That's okay.
I have 2 points / questions. I just want to preface it first with a question to make sure my understanding is correct. So I want to believe that my understanding is the spirit of this bill is ultimately to compensate for the dining experiences that are not currently available, and that is that correct? I mean, obviously they lost business the last 3 months, but now we're looking at this bill is to sort of compensate for people for the not being able to be at full capacity as before. Is my understanding correct? That
yes.
The spirit of this bill is that?
Yes, and I think especially not only just the restrictions on indoor seating, and even outdoor seating hasn't added as much as their capacity used to be, but I think we anticipate that a lot of people will not feel comfortable being in public spaces, and especially indoor public spaces, until there's a vaccine. So no matter what's happening with the actual restrictions, I think restaurants are going to see much less capacity in business than they used to see.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I was on the same page before I move forward, because then I wouldn't have moved forward. Because I think if that is the spirit of what this bill is ultimately about, it should be built and designed, both the delivery and takeout or whatever you end up with, one or both, where the alcohol, the way it's it's presented, it should align with what would have been as closely as possible had the person or people would be dining in the restaurant. So that's my position based on what our discussion just was. So here are my two things. First is well, they're both observations that lead to questions. The first is, well, and also because I think we really need to build in deterrence to what we're all afraid of because of this lack of enforcement. I think we are trying to support businesses for dining with the alcohol experience as best as we can. So I think we have to be very specific about the language in this bill, and I know that you are being very open to that. So here are my two areas where I think needs more specificity. One, I think, is that there should be made mention in some way of happy hour drinks. I think happy hour drink specials need to be at least pointed out that those are not takeaway, that those are exclusively for dining at the restaurant, outdoor dining, that those cannot be takeaway. So I don't know, do you feel that that is a fair point, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I want to look into that a little bit more, but I think I remember seeing something from the governor recently about discounts and coupons on alcohol. So I'll have to take a look, but I think that might be something that's already being contemplated, but if not, certainly happy to look into that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think if this is the bill that people are going to be, or ultimately the law that people are going to be looking at as a reference, the restaurants, that they should know that people can't just take away, and there's lots of 1-for-2s I've been seeing, and I don't know, that's not being, I don't know if that's being monitored and if people are walking away. I feel like that's a very attractive thing to do, on a beautiful summer day, 7 or 8 o'clock, watch the sunset, take 2-for-1 drinks, walk over to the river, and, The other thing,
I'm sorry, I do also just want to point out that with a size restriction and an accompanying requirement that it be accompanied by the purchase of a meal, it would be pretty impractical to be able to get multiple drinks without buying multiple meals. So unless
well,
you're
that goes into my second point. That goes right into my second point, is that right now all I see is purchase of food, and that's really vague. And I think that there needs to be very deliberate language built into the bill that describes something. This is just off the top of my head. For example, if you're buying a drink up to $20, that there must be an equivalent amount of food purchases, which is not unreasonable, because when I go to a bar and I'll get, a glass of expensive wine, like maybe I'll get a $12 or $14 glass of wine, because down here that's how much it costs. I'm going to get a hamburger. It costs $15, $16, $17. So it's not unreasonable, I don't think, to ask for a 1-to-1 up to $20 of food. I think that would be a potential, not that exact number, I'm just throwing it out there, but I think having some sort of ratio of food to beverage to at least to a certain price point, what might deter people from just buying a drink to just hang out and walk around, because then they're required to buy an equivalent amount of food. And then I thought, over the threshold, then you're getting to probably more dining type of people who are going to be buying, if they're buying a $40 bottle of wine, then maybe it goes to 50% or some other ratio, that I'm trying to find. I think there needs to be language built into this that really, really supports the idea that this is about dining and not about drinking, that we're giving people the privilege and the opportunity to support their local restaurants that I want to support as well, as a diner and not as a drinker. You know what I'm saying? I purchase of food, I really think needs to be built out and thought about, and with just an example of what I gave, and that's just off the top of my head, and that might not be feasible, but purchase of food, in my opinion, is too vague, and I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely something we're looking into. I know we've heard concerns from people that food is vague, and potentially allows bars or restaurants to sell a thing of fries or a box of chips or a bag of chips with a drink and get away with it. So and I really do think that comes back to, I think we're definitely open to looking into that and being more specific. I do think that's an area where the enforcement concerns raised are really valid. That, like, you know, I'm sure that there are bars and restaurants that are probably not complying with that rule, and that concerns us as well. And, you know, I think we're all dancing around the big issue that was raised here was enforcement, and we take that very seriously. And I think that'll be the #1 thing we focus on if this bill is going to be feasible, is how do we enforce it in a way that's meaningful for the community.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I just, as Bob and Carter and Donna know, last night, I finally just documented something I'd been seeing, on and off for the last several months, because it just got out of control. It's right across the street from my building. I'm not directly affected, but the people of the building above obviously are. I'm sure you'll hear from them if you haven't already. The people on the opposite side of my building would likely be affected. And then just anybody walking in the vicinity, they were packed to the gills on the sidewalks, standing, waiting to, I guess, enter. Maybe some people were drinking. Nobody was wearing a mask. So all that stuff aside, containers open, closed, sealed, not sealed, it's a health problem when these people congregate. And I also was sort of mocked, somebody saw me raising my camera and they were just like, hope you get a great picture. So if there are people who are just like not caring because no one is enforcing right now at this moment, and it's built, and it's a slow build. I mean, the last thing I'll say, because I'm sure there are other people who want to speak, is that it's a kick in the teeth for the businesses who are really doing a great job. There's a lot. I want to say that I'm really impressed by a lot of the businesses near me. There's a lot of these, people building out into parking spaces, and they're going all out, putting out nice ferns and building platforms, and they really care. And it's these 1 or 2 businesses that are completely like ruining it for the rest of the class, because, and then all these other businesses that are doing the right thing are probably like, screw that. Obviously no one's enforcing those guys just down the block. So I'm afraid this is all going to snowball, and it's going to get worse if this bill is not really, buttoned up. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. We share your concerns. Social distancing is incredibly important. Mask wearing is incredibly important. And I think someone just put in the chat, the big issue is there's a pandemic, and couldn't agree more. It's a public health issue, and public health is our first priority. And if we feel that, this isn't going to be feasible in a way that protects public health, then, we're not going to do it. So.
Yeah.
Just go ahead.
And I think I would just add that Robin really gets to the heart of why we're even talking about this in the first place, is because we're all sort of dealing with what is happening and the consequences of that, and trying to save the character and the nature of the businesses in the West Village, and that we do want, in the spirit of the bill, to be about the purposes to protect and help those businesses. And the feedback that we're hearing, I think, is very, very helpful.
And I would just follow up on the food component. I mean, that was something that was brought up last month when we were discussing the bill. And really, the state liquor authority, all they require is a bag of peanuts. That's considered food in terms of, the service of alcohol. It's got, like, even a bar has to have some sort of food service, and the state liquor authority has kind of interpreted that to be a bag of peanuts or something, like a bag of chips, as you said, Mr. Jacobson. And so that what we did is we said, well, 50% of the meal, or the 50%, the drink, we talked about money. And in other words, the meal itself should be 50% of the cost.
Just to be clear, Bob, that wasn't going to carry at the full board. And I just want to bring this back to where we left this at the full board, because you're cycling back to deliver exactly the same scenario that's going to play out the same way. And the point of the board members speaking at our last full board meeting was, what difference does it make if it's delivery with food or not? It's being delivered to a point, and that has nothing to do with takeout. And the point was made by a number of people. If you have a very high-end establishment that's making high-end cocktails that are $20 each, that are being delivered, that are a huge part of our community, what difference does it make if you have, 2 drinks delivered that you have to have a $20 food bill? It's the choice of the consumer. Right now, if somebody has any health complications, they can't go to those establishments. So now you're burdening them with also ordering food with that. A big part of this is that people can't participate because they can't go out. And so if something's being delivered, why are we being overly prescriptive if what the bill is addressing is the sizes? Is this addressing that it's no different than what you would order when you are in a place, or that it's a glass of wine? I mean, that's, you know, we're being very prescriptive on businesses that are just trying to make it at the expense of consumers who may not want to order that food.
Yeah, my point.
Businesses.
Yeah,
I have my
point.
hand up, Bob. Am I?
I got you guys. Hold on, but just to respond, my point is that we're trying to figure out different ways with that food component, ways to figure it out so that it wouldn't just be all about drinking, and there would be a food component to it, because I think that's what you had indicated earlier, Mr. Jacobson. If if you brought food, whether it's takeout or delivery, I don't think, why can't I, on the way home from work, get a drink and buy a meal and take it home with me? And that the food component, we were trying to figure out a way to make it so that it wasn't just a drinking component, that people could actually do that. And Carter makes very good points.
Supports the takeout part. So let's not talk about that. Let's talk about what's helping our local businesses. And we're being very prescriptive on them to a lot of people who make high-end cocktails, and that's their business.
I understand that. The point that's being made is that it's complicated, okay? And Robin mentioned the food component. We tried to do something about the food component. It's very complicated. It's hard to do. And that's the point that I'm following up with. So I will now go to Mr. Flynn. Cormac, you'd like to ask a question?
Yeah. Hello, I think Donna.
Let's do, because Cormac, you spoke once already, so I certainly want to get back to you, but can we let Katie speak first and some of the people that haven't spoken yet?
Okay, although specifically I spoke when the conversation was limited to packaging, but.
Yeah, no, Donna, everybody that's raising their hand right now has already spoken, so go ahead, Mr. Flynn.
Okay, so, I mean, there's a couple of things. So I wanted to address first this, as you said, the enforcement sort of piece of this, right? So, and I'm just throwing this out there as a sort of an idea off the top of the head. I don't know, these guys were going back and forth about something else. I thought we were just throwing out some feedback and thoughts and ideas here. So, we all understand the enforcement problem, right? Which is that enforcement is a function of the city right now and of the city police. And the 1996 law, it's no longer criminal summons or anything like that. It's a ticket. And also they de-emphasize it for policy reasons that are grounded in really good social justice reasons, right? Maybe this is a chance to rethink enforcement, right? Would you, or I'm throwing out there, maybe you should consider adding a 5th section to the bill that is specifically about enforcement, and that takes the current calls to defund the police and to rethink the way that we do enforcement in our society, to think about creating a new and much more robust enforcement capacity at the SLA itself, right? Because you're expanding dramatically here the kinds of things that the SLA is trying to manage and keep a hold of, right? And yet we know that the SLA enforcement capacity now is, by their own view, well below what they would like it to be to truly enforce the current law. So maybe the solution is, right, to create a new enforcement capacity as part of this. It's just an idea I'm throwing out there, right? The other point that I want to make was something, Jacob, when you talked about, and it's a very good point, you talked about, part of this is you're working very hard because you want to sort of protect the restaurants to try to keep part of the character of the village and things like that. But it's also true that there is risk in the takeout portion of this. And I'm not catastrophizing. I'm not saying like tomorrow it's Sodom and Gomorrah and Bourbon Street and everything like that, right? But there is substantial existential risk to the way things are in the village now and our quality of life of having takeout and carry out drinks. It's not a small thing. It's playing with fire. I'm not saying you shouldn't play with it. I'm just saying that, we should be careful. And, I understand your point to Mr. Ely's opening question in this, I know that Brad is doing this for all the right reasons. I know Brad and everything like that. But it's also true, like, the Hill newspaper in Washington was reporting it back in April, that the liquor industry is putting massive money in nationwide to convince governors like Cuomo and other governors to take these actions to liberalize in the coronavirus, with the hopes that they could then convert it into permanent changes nationwide in liquor. So just remember too that things that we do now that we think are pilot or experiment, I love Brad, he may not have the mojo to put the genie back in the bottle if it turns out bad later. And so we should proceed cautiously, just in my personal opinion. So
I appreciate that very much, the comments. I appreciate
Go
that.
ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to say I appreciate the comments and the idea about increased enforcement capacity for the SLA is absolutely something we've considered. I think the tight spot we're in is just the real devastation of the state's finances and the limited resources to allocate to any number of incredibly important priorities that we have, like schools and healthcare and all that. So, I do think that that's something we are going to be strongly looking into, but our ability to do that is perhaps going to be contingent upon the aid we receive from the federal government and, our ability to independently raise resources through some of the other legislation that Senator Hoylman either sponsors or co-sponsors to raise revenue for the state.
Katie, you have a question?
Okay, got myself off mute. Are you hearing me?
Gotcha.
Okay. I see, I have 6 points. They're not all of them very long. I just want to point out to Jacob and Kendall that a member of my family went to Cowgirl shortly after everything started to buy some margaritas for a family gathering and was able to buy 3 margaritas and 1 single-serve bag of Fritos to serve as the food. So that's what's happened. It's not just 1 drink and 1 bag of peanuts. It's multiple drinks and a small amount of food. So that was one of the anecdotes that we shared in the committee last time. I wanted to point out that there are no members of the community who support the takeout aspect of what you're talking about. We don't hear any support for that because it's led to these abuses in the street. No one seems to have the kind of problem with delivery. That seems to be, like, okay. We're not having complaints about delivery. So I just want to be sure that we're all thinking about that. And you yourselves have said that this is an attempt to help our restaurants. No one's complaining about the restaurants. We're complaining about the bar aspect. Restaurants that are morphing into bars because that's the only way they can make money. Cowgirl is a restaurant, but they can make a lot more money with 3 margaritas and 1 bag of chips than they can do with something else. And I think, when we want to preserve the village, we're talking about these little restaurants. That's what I keep hearing. But that's not what the problem is. The problem is with the bars. And it just dawned on me today while we were talking, we're a little bit a victim of the 500-foot rule, perhaps, on Hudson Street. We've allowed so many to be cheek by jowl. That's the only thing that'll make money. And now, it is contributing to a public health problem. So I haven't thought that through, but it's something that just occurred to me when we were talking tonight. And, do we want to have a lot of new OP licenses in this environment? Is that maybe something that we should be thinking about? We get requests for them, but that's only competition for the businesses that we're trying to save. And it only dilutes the clientele in a certain way. You know what I mean? Like more places, the same number of people spread over more places mean no one's going to survive. So and that's something that occurred to me today while we were talking. And the other thing that we hear is about the duration. How long should this go on? How long is it an emergency? I'm one of those people who is not going to go out for a very long time. But we do order in, food once a week. We had we'll order from a very nice place. And so it's not as if, people will continue to order from these places. But I think we ought to really think about this duration. 2 years seems like a long time. We should be back on our feet before 2 years. They all should be back on their feet before 2 years. And if they can't, then maybe they couldn't even make it anyway. But so those are just some thoughts that have come to me tonight, and I wanted to share them, and curious to see what other people think. Thank you, and please thank Senator Hoylman as always. We appreciate Brad very much.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There was not much of a question there, Mr. Jacobson,
No.
but if you'd like to respond, you're more than welcome to.
Only that I imagine that 3 margaritas and a bag of chips would be the title of a few people's autobiographies during the pandemic. So, and I do really appreciate the issues you raised, and I think they're really serious. We need to take them seriously, and I appreciate the points about drawing more people in here, and the issues that it raises with concentration of businesses that don't necessarily usually sell that volume of alcohol, and obviously particularly to go. So thank you.
And then I just want to make sure, I'm going to go to Mr. Levine next, but Donna and Carter, if you have questions, I don't see your hands raised, but that's because I can't. So I just, I apologize if I haven't gotten to you in case you wanted to speak. But I'll go with Mr. Levine. Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob. We've heard so much tonight from community residents, which is all very valuable. A lot of information, most of which I agree with. Living at Greenwich Avenue and 6th Avenue, we have 24 restaurants within a 2-block area, and we've seen all of the good points and all the abuses we've heard about. But I have a question of a slightly different nature to the representatives of our state senator, and that's, have you heard any reaction from the restaurant owners and the bar owners? That's the one thing I've heard very little about, other than positive reactions from the few restaurant owners I've spoken to in the restaurants we patronize. Can you give us a quick idea? Is this positively seen by the owners of the eating and drinking establishments? And have they given you any recommendations, any input to make the legislation better? Can you share with us if anything like that has occurred in the process of moving this bill through the state Senate?
Yes, I would say that overwhelmingly the owners of restaurants in particular, and also bars and their representatives, is overwhelmingly positive, very supportive, and they always describe this as, it's not the only thing keeping them afloat, but it is one of the very crucial things keeping them from going out of business right now. So I would say that restaurant owners are very eager to preserve this, and they're willing to make accommodations and, comply with stricter rules and establish a real comprehensive set of guidelines for how this is, going to work. But I think that they are really keen on having this as a lifeline because it's really helping. So, I think they do want to be good neighbors to the overwhelming vast majority of them. And look, we've heard a lot of concerns about enforcement tonight, so I'm not going to pretend like there aren't bad actors out there. But the ones that, that have come to us and said, hey, we want to have regulations on this. We want to be good actors. We want to be good partners. We employ people from the community, help us, find a way forward that helps the community too. There are bad actors out there, but I do know that there are people that really want to make a difference and be good neighbors.
Thank you. William Benish, you got a question, William?
Yes, one other question for you, Kendall. I have spoken to a few business owners, and this doesn't just apply for alcohol, it's for food as well. Obviously, most restaurants prefer when people call and pick up the order rather than get it delivered, because there's a large delivery fee that's often associated with people using delivery apps, which is very common. And it sounds like there's a lot of community support for perhaps keeping the delivery option and nixing the takeout option. To the extent the bill shifts into something like that, would you consider, and I think the city council has capped delivery fees in New York City, would you consider including in the bill some kind of delivery fee cap for alcohol delivery?
I'd have to discuss it with the senator, but I think he'd be very open to that. And in fact, you know, Jacob can speak to this. We've signed on to letters in support of capping delivery fees charged by third-party delivery services like Grubhub. So, you know, he's very aware that that's a concern, and the restaurants have expressed that that's something that does take a bite out of their profits. So.
Yeah, and I just add that people don't realize that. People who are ordering have no idea that they're taking 15%, and it's like you can't even get the delivery, you know, on time anymore because it's all being outsourced. And so it's frustrating on both sides. And I agree. I've spoken to restaurants who they thank me for calling and coming picking up because the delivery part is very expensive. So I think that was a great question, William.
Thank you.
Great comment, by the way. Lois, go ahead.
This lends to one of the residents mentioned that one person ordered 6 drinks, and I was alarmed to hear that. And I was curious if there is, I'm reading the bill, and I'm curious to see if there's anything there that limits for a person to order a certain amount of drinks, like 2 drinks or 3. And then it occurred to me, if there's one person ordering those 6 drinks, and let's just say their ID was checked, they can distribute it to their friends who are underage drinkers. So I was just curious if the senator has considered limitations on the number of takeout or even delivery, not so much with delivery because you might be delivering to a whole family, but one person ordering takeout.
I think that's certainly something we're willing to consider. You know, I think we'd have to discuss it with them, but and I also do think that that is something that, you know, I'm sorry, I'm looking away because I'm looking at our bill text on my desktop computer. You know, I think that's something we do need to consider, that we don't want people, you know, just purchasing a ton of takeout drinks, you know, accompanied by one small bag and, you know, getting around the rules that way. So, you know, I do think that's an important thing to consider, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And, you know, I think we anticipated some things like that being clarified by the SLA rulemaking process that accompanies the bill, but, you know, there's a fine line sometimes in statute about how prescriptive you want to be versus how much you want to leave up to regulators to give them flexibility. But I do think that that's an area that could potentially use some more clarification.
And then the part B is the identification of the age to drink, particularly with the third party bringing the food and the alcohol. To my knowledge, I've asked my neighbors, they don't even ask about to see the ID, and they're certainly not going to bring back the food wherever it's coming from. So I think checking IDs is really a complicated issue.
Right, thank you. And as I mentioned earlier, we are considering ways to strengthen the ID requirement in the bill, including potentially checking ID at the point of delivery. So requiring the delivery person to check the ID at the door. So that we're
even the third party, like Grubhub, and comes really fast, gives you the stuff, even just leaves it at the door sometimes because it's contactless, and then leaves.
Yep.
And,
you know, we you know, understand that it poses some questions about implementation, and I think we're very open to working through those, but understand that it's a really important issue to make sure we get right, that, you know, we can't be enabling, you know, young kids to order alcohol just because it can be delivered. But as some people have mentioned on the call tonight, liquor stores are currently allowed to deliver alcohol right now, you know, and before the pandemic, they were allowed to do that. So it is possible to do it, and it is possible to verify identity. So we'll be taking a look at that.
Thank you.
Kristen Shea.
Hi, yes, I wanted to touch on the point that was made about the delivery versus pickup and the fees going to the delivery company. I always pick up. I have never, ever, ever gotten delivery in this city. And one of the reasons is that I want to be able to tip people who work at these restaurants, because not only are the restaurant owners been hard hit, but also all of the people who work there and rely on tips who are really struggling right now. So I just hope that that's also considered, that I'm actually going right now as soon as this call is over to get pickup, and so I'm going to be tipping the folks when I pick up. And I just think that we need to consider them as well as the owners in this scenario.
Hey, Kristen, I have a question for you on that. Basically, from the way the law is written right now, that provision is no different than the to-go provision now, and that's what's causing all the problems. So how would you create a difference in that, or is there no difference? Because that's where we kind of keep getting stuck.
Yeah, I recognize that, and I think that the points that are being made about pickup are very valid. That there's no guarantee that it'll end up at someone's home versus on a stoop somewhere next to the restaurant. But I just, again, as the point was made, when you get delivery, the tip goes to the delivery person, where I recognize they also have to work. But as opposed to going to the folks who make your drink, the wait staff who's now, instead of waiting tables, is handing out food through a delivery window, through a pickup window, that we're supporting their livelihood too by picking up versus having it delivered. So I think some of the points that were made as far as identifying the container, I think it was Pete who made that point. I thought that was really good, so that there can be more enforcement, closing the containers. I mean, all of those ideas that were thrown out during this phone call, I think could help the situation. But I just want that the people who are part of the staff, not just the owners, to be considered as how this bill might be able to help them as well.
I really appreciate that, and I think it's such an important point to bring up, that we're not just talking about business owners here. We're talking about the thousands and thousands of New Yorkers they employ, who are really struggling right now and who are unemployed in many cases, or just recently started employment again, and who are predominant or disproportionately people of color, who are really dependent upon that income to survive right now. And so that is a really big consideration that we are thinking about. Is public health comes first for us, but it's very important to remember that we're talking about people's lives and people's incomes and people's ability to survive in one of the most challenging times I think any of us have ever been through. So we're trying to do right by everybody here, and I appreciate you bringing that conversation back to the folks who work for those restaurants, that they're struggling right now, and we'd like to help them out.
Bob, I wanted to add.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to just say, Donna or Carter, if you would like to go ahead.
So one of the other areas, as far as what can be sold, I think it's important to eliminate bottles of wine and bottles of liquor. Specifically, the bottles of wine is very important, because that's a protected class of wine sales only businesses, as well as liquor stores. And as you know, you're only allowed to own one wine shop or one liquor store in New York State. And so that's really cutting into a protected group's livelihood, which the entire ABC law is designed to protect. And so that's just one area. I think that's very important. I don't think many people recognize that, but that's, you guys, I'm sure are, but that's an important consideration, I think.
Yep, and you know, that's one of the main reasons why we are considering size limitations is, you know, we certainly don't want to push off the troubles of the restaurant industry onto wine and liquor store owners. And, you know, there's a number of reasons why size limitations are, you know, a good consideration right now, but that's a big one.
Yeah, the bottles of wine are also a big one, because that's something that traditionally, if you know, basically if the bill did not, if you can sell bottles of wine to go, which they're not allowed to currently sell, you know, so that's the question, is it's sort of a gray area, at least.
So Carter, just following up on that one specific issue, what about bottles of beer?
They're already allowed to sell bottles of beer, any OP license to go.
No, I understand that, but you were talking about competition. I mean, there are lots of places that you can buy.
Current liquor license law, Bob, is structured that any OP license can sell a 6-pack of beer to go. You don't see it in New York City, but it's allowed. And so it's not disrupting the underlying structure of the ABC law.
Okay. I've never seen anyone sell a 6-pack of beer from a bar, so that's why.
You see it upstate all the time in the back of places that'll have a to-go shop connected with a restaurant for beer.
Okay. Do you guys, Carter, do you have something else?
So that's you know, one component, and then as far as the I think that the delivery aspect is really important, because many people long after this, even if there is a vaccine or at risk, the socializing is going to change, where people, I think, are going to be socializing at home much more, and the ability to order drinks from your local establishment to an area that you are in control of, such as your home, is very important. And so I think that's why really some distinctions need to be made. And those same people might have been the people who are patronizing their local businesses, but don't feel comfortable doing so. And so that's, you know, an important aspect, because if there is no vaccine, it really is something I think that just really needs to be taken into account. And the other, just looking over my notes, and as far as the time frame, I was just thinking, you know, Katie, to your comment and the amount of time, I mean, I think it's going to be a long time before we're already 5 months into this, you know, really in New York City. 2 years doesn't seem like, it seems like a long time, but it may not be for the health of our businesses. And I also, just for me speaking personally, I think, Kendall, you know, what I hear from businesses is that this is helpful, but you also need to be addressing some of their primary concerns, which are rent and taxes, you know, that are passed through from the businesses. And, you know, this isn't going to save businesses, but, you know, that conversation, that's what I hear when I talk to places. I mean, you see the statistics, 70% of places haven't paid rent. I think I just saw 30% of residents haven't paid rent, and, you know, tax collection is way down, you know, on stuff. So that's, you know, sharing that burden across a lot of different people, you know, and I think there's a number of people who have contacted you about different aspects, but I just bring that up because that's an important consideration as well for our restaurants. So.
How about you, Donna? Do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just want to sort of address what Kristen was saying, that when you're focusing on the delivery, I'm one of those people also that always calls ahead and goes and picks up my food. I don't use the delivery services. So I think it's somehow, maybe one of the ways to do it would be to, if you call and place an order, you know, a lot of the problems we're having now, I think, are from people just walking up to places and getting their drink. They're not thinking to call ahead and order. So that may be one, because I realize when you go in, you're really getting it to go, but that may be one way to make those of us that want to go pick up our things to be able to do that. Otherwise, I think everybody's covered everything. I mean, not having the straws and having really properly sealed containers would go a long way to prevent a lot of the stuff, I believe, that we're seeing on the street corners now. So,
okay, because that segue. I mean, my plan is to have a discussion among committee members so that we can discuss this some more among ourselves, and Kendall and Jacob could listen in to what we have to say, and so could everyone else. But I mean, we as a committee, I think, I think what you're talking about, Donna, is exactly that. I'd like to have some discussion among ourselves to see if we can come up with any solutions or anything that can help. Unless somebody else has a question, I'm gonna change gears here and then just have discussion with the committee. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna close the questioning and then just open up, I guess, what we consider our executive session and discuss what we want to do at this point and what recommendations we may want to make if we want to make any recommendations. So I'll open up the floor to anybody on the committee that's interested in starting. If not, I will. I thought I got I think a few very good suggestions from people after our full board meeting about the to-go, and I asked everybody at the full board. I want an answer. I want answers as to how we can prevent the takeout aspect of things turning into what everybody fears and the lack of enforcement. And one of the ideas was to cap the time for takeout, limiting grab and go drinks to kind of a happy hour period, 5 to 8 p.m. And I mean, we kind of discussed that in our resolution last time, but we basically didn't limit the takeout aspect of it. But that I thought was a fairly good suggestion. I wanted to see what other people thought about that.
I think that was my suggestion. Yeah, I mean, if one of my fears is because, I live in the West Village and right along Hudson, it's just been bananas. And it is these groups of people. And I just imagined that there would be these like happy hour groups coming from whatever new work situation they're dealing with, and then wandering down to have a drink together, taking out that drink and then congregating on whatever corner or park and drinking there in large groups, right? As people slowly return to work, these groups will grow and grow and grow and will want more to socialize in that way. So if we cap the time, then, they won't be able to do that.
Yeah, and I will say that in terms of capping the time, I spoke to Donna about this, and Donna then said, well, wait a second here. I pick up at 11 o'clock, so if we say 5 to 8, what about the people like Donna who eat later in the evening, who have a legitimate reason to pick up and take their stuff home? So anyway, I thought that was an interesting idea. And I do think to a certain extent, I don't think it solves the problem of the takeout, the concerns, but it definitely is a limitation. And then do you limit, can there be a limitation maybe Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights? I don't know. But that's something that was brought up, and I thought that was a fairly reasonable idea. And one of the other ideas was no grab and go drinks for those who dined at the location, or one grab and go drink per person. So limiting the drinks. I don't know what other of you think, but I'm trying to look for a solution, a way to create a situation where we don't necessarily have to rely on enforcement, which we kind of all realize is probably not going to happen.
But Bob, I just for clarification for the timing, that seems to be the timing when the congregating in front of bars starts. So I don't really get, that's when the hordes of people begin on Hudson. And it doesn't seem like it creates a distinction that's distinct enough that prevents the situation that everybody is so fearful of, which is, which we've all seen, certainly seen pictures of.
No, I understand that. I was looking for ways to see if it can be done. I mean, I think we kind of said last time we were okay with the takeout portion, or not the takeout portion, but the delivery portion of it. And now there's concerns, you know, so if we want to figure out a way for takeout, is there a solution? And that I keep posing that question, and I'm trying to figure it out. And that was one.
The problem is that, I mean, to be honest, there is no actual solution to how you can prevent people from drinking wherever they feel like once you've handed them the drink, whether or not it's in a sealed container like a Coke can, you know. I mean, that delays a little bit and it sounds good, but you know, the problem is that now the restaurants that we love and have been really good neighbors, people are fearing that they're just going to turn into bars now. So, because that's where they can make more money because they can't serve as many people food. And so suddenly, you know, we're having these streets that were dealing quietly with restaurants. Now they're, you know, big mob scenes. And, you know, we all know what happened with the White Horse Tavern. And, you know, that was the one example, the one place in the state where they lost their license or the license was suspended is in CB2. You know, so when I tried to bring up earlier saying, you know, what's going to work for a lot of places isn't going to work for some of these denser residential neighborhoods. That's a problem for the whole bill, really, that Brad has. And, you know, the irony is that his district, his personal district, is where there's some of the worst problems. So, I mean, I don't know that we're going to come up with an answer how to deal with this because we can't prevent it and we're not advocates of enforcement outside the restaurant itself. It's not possible for the restaurant. And so, you know, we all know we're in a little bit of a no-win situation. So the only thing we can try to do is mitigate a little and have, you know, maybe you can't, like Katie said, maybe you can't pick up 6 margaritas, you know, with your chips. Maybe some of it has to even do with the number of drinks because then it becomes a party. But these things seem like beyond us. You know, I feel like, you know, we're trying to come up with little answers for something that, you know, Pete said earlier tonight, which is that we haven't had one letter in support of this. There's nobody who came on the meeting tonight to speak in favor. So how do we deal with that?
Go ahead, Cormac.
Yeah, so, you know, and just one aside, I have a slightly different perspective from you, Susan. For myself, I'm not worried about the restaurants that we all go to and love. I'm worried about the restaurants that we already hate, but.
All right, well, I thought maybe some of the ones we loved needed this service to stay alive.
But no, Bob, I think it's great that you're trying to sort of work these problems and get to it. And I'm all for us continuing to brainstorm and things and trying to sort of be a little generative here for Jacob and Kendall on this and, you know, trying to help the situation work out. But I just do want to make sure we don't get into the point, you know, remember, we don't have to solve all of these problems or questions about this today. You know, I came into this assuming that, you know, after the last full board, that we need to be coming out of here with a revised res or something, but it seems to me that what I've heard, you know, and in the beginning talking, you know, from Brad's staff was, you know, we don't have there isn't necessarily a final bill here. They mooted something and now they're revising and they're collecting lots of information. And we've already been providing some input in the service and a way for the public to give input here. And so I think it's great if we can try to come up with solutions, but you know, I don't know that it's necessary for us to even come out of this with, you know, with some sort of a position or something. So I would warn against us. It's one thing to be throwing out ideas. I'd warn against us at this point trying to micromanage the situation. Just a thought.
Yeah, I guess the point is that what I think they're looking for is feedback, and I'm trying to give as much feedback as I can. And yeah, so I mean, I appreciate it, Cormac. I have Robin. Do you want to speak, Robin Rothstein?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a complicated issue, but I'm approaching this based on facts and my 5.5 years of experience on this committee. My experience on this committee has been when we are evaluating applications is we go by the facts presented to us, things that have, and history and the testimony before us, we rarely, in my experience, give a lot of weight, if any weight, to projections. Maybe this might happen, or we think maybe this segment of the population might feel that way, or they might feel they're not being represented. That's been my experience, and I'm happy to hear from anybody who feels I misunderstood, you know, I've been not getting it right. So on that, my two takeaways here, and I feel, and I'm open to hearing about how I'm wrong about this, that my two feelings are the two facts I'm hearing tonight, and the other 2 or 3 calls we've had on this, the spirit of this bill, based on my understanding, what Kendall seemed to corroborate, my understanding is that this bill, the spirit of it is to, largely in part, to supplement the loss of revenue based on the lack of diners in the restaurant, because they're not getting the indoor diners. And when they do, it's going to be at smaller capacity. That is the spirit of this bill. That's the one fact that I believe is true and correct and not fake news. The other is that the testimony, every single bit of testimony that I have heard tonight and the 1 or 2 previous meetings from residents, from the public, not restaurant owners or operators, has been either fully against this or like hesitant about it, wanting to support, willing to sort of give because they understand that we need to kind of, but there's been nobody, I haven't heard a single person yet say, well, I'm in support of this, and I'd be really upset if I couldn't order a $20 drink from home and I have to order food. I mean, so that's my feeling is, as we sit here, we're looking at this, the spirit of this bill is to help restaurants restore the diners or that they are losing, the diners with alcohol that they're losing, and we're giving them the privilege of, potentially the privilege of delivery and or takeaway with food, appropriate, applicable amount of food with the drinks that they're ordering, not a little bag of Fritos with 6 margaritas, and that the residents and the public are against it. As far as I know, Bob has spread the word about these meetings far and wide, and there could have been anybody from the public in support, not the operators, but people who frequent these establishments. We've had plenty of them come and support a very controversial applications who come and say, I love this guy, I live in the neighborhood, I want to support him, the place on Prince Street with all the pots and pans. I mean, that was a tough one because he's beloved, but also he drove the residents crazy. We had that was a tough one because we want to support the business, but to that, there were 2 sides to that. I'm not quite seeing the other side to this as far as people being in support of this from the public in a full-blown way as far as the drinks component. That's why I know we don't want to be prescriptive, but I think we based on what I think the spirit of this bill, my understanding is, and that the public is against it, that we have to be prescriptive, because what we have seen factually documented is that there are enough bad actors out there that this will continue. And so I think that's my observation, that I'm open to people showing me that I'm not correct.
Thank you, Robin. Katie, you raised your hand.
Yep, I raised my hand. I guess I have 2 questions. One is, are we trying to do another resolution tonight, Bob? Yes or no?
Yes, we are. We're going to do a resolution. And I think the resolution is going to be designed to talk about what happened, and if we have any, I guess, ideas in which way to tackle this. I don't know if it's a yay or nay, because we don't really have a bill yet. We have a bill that may get redesigned, and maybe we should comment on it after it's redesigned. But I think what we're trying to do is feedback, and I do think a resolution makes sense. So the answer is yes.
And then I have a question for Carter. Carter, I don't think the committee is moving too far away from its position before. I don't, and I don't think we have. And I want to understand from you what we can actually.
Well, if the resolution fails at full board, looked like it was going to before, you can't rewrite it, on the spot. It's a fairly complicated resolution. And again, you've got, what are people against specifically? What we heard during the discussion at the full board meeting was, and we just heard it tonight, Kristen's not against picking up drinks. Donna is not against picking up drinks. So to say everybody's against it is not accurate. And that's the problem, that when this gets—
I was talking about the community.
And so, without really delivery, to go, packaging, what can be sold, community input, those seem to be the 5 areas here. And the only area that we keep hitting up with issues is the to-go portion. And then it's restrictions on the delivery. So it's actually, and clear, there's realistically, there's probably 15 to 20 places in our community board of the many hundreds that are licensed, that are creating issues that we're managing against. There are plenty of places that are just fine right now that don't have people sitting, standing all over the place and drinking outside, and are great to go to, and are probably the places that Donna and Kristen are walking by to pick up food and some drinks to go. So, everybody has a different experience. And so bringing something to the full board, it needs to pass the full board. But if it has weaknesses all over the place, which is what we saw last month, it's not going to pass. And I don't think that that sends a particularly clear message to Brad, who's a former chair of our board, when, if it passes by 1 vote. We're not really, Brad is a very unique relationship with our board. And I think, to Bob's point, maybe we need to point out more recommendations, and him specifically understanding the board spot, pointing out where we have disagreement, but not an absolute yay or nay. Because this bill is obviously statewide. It's not just the West Village. And, there are carve-outs for New York City. And that's even something that we could advocate for, that maybe this is not, we shouldn't have, certain elements in New York City. Who knows? But it's a little more complicated. That's why, Katie, to your point, I just think it's irresponsible to have a bill come from a committee to the full board that doesn't pass, or is, doesn't delineate all the different issues. It's sort of—
well, at the risk of, but doesn't Community Board 2 have more liquor licenses per square inch than any place else in the state?
Well, I think Lower Manhattan is, but it may be per capita, but that doesn't preclude us from driving the entire state's restaurant business. We've got—
No, I'm just thinking, sometimes exceptionalism is good and sometimes it's bad, but maybe in this case, we want to say something that it's we're dealing with problems on a different scale than some other places.
Yeah, when we're dealing with issues of enforcement.
Back and forth, please.
Sorry, thank you. But I just trying to figure it out. Thank you, Susan.
Okay. Okay. Donna, go ahead, Donna.
No point raising your hand if you're not going to.
I'm sorry. Let Donna go, and then I'll call.
Just to be clear, Donna cannot raise her hand, and I cannot raise my hand, which is one of the issues.
I appreciate that.
I'm glad that everybody wants to talk, though. Go ahead, Donna.
I just wanted to say that, a lot of the complaints that the community, rightfully, myself included, is upset about is all the chaos that's going on a handful of places that are being really bad actors. And I think that we also have to keep in mind when we look at this, that, no matter what, first of all, no matter what rules are in place, if somebody wants to break them, they always find ways to break them. That was before the pandemic, that will happen after the pandemic. But when this goes into place, if I'm understanding correctly, restaurants will be able to have people seated inside. Sidewalk cafes will go back to normal. They will not be having setups in the street anymore. And it will be obvious when 10 people are hanging out on street corners. Again, enforcement's a problem, but people could have bought their 6-pack of beer before this all happened and hung out on the street corner drinking that, or a stoop, and nobody was really doing that, or at Hudson River Park Trust or something. So I just want to frame this in the point that hopefully life will be a little bit more normal. Now, I think that it will take a long time for restaurants to be totally full, because even if it's okay, people won't feel comfortable. But I just think that, you know, so many of the things we're complaining about are really lack of enforcement for this situation we're in now. And I think the governor should be listening to this to realize all the problems that this has created in our area. So the other thing is maybe there should be a separate carve out for the city or something. Maybe there's a way to look at that. I did want to just respond to what Bob threw out at the beginning about the happy hour hours and the Thursday to Saturday. To me, that is totally at cross purposes of what we're trying to promote people doing. That's almost like saying, this is all about drinking and come at those drinking hours, as opposed to what I think of the intent of this bill, which is really to be able to go and get your food and get a drink and go. Or if you're fortunate enough to have that specialty cocktail place across the street from you, go there and get your drink and bring it home for your thing. So I just wanted to put out there that I don't like the happy hour ideas, and I would encourage you to think of something that if you are getting drinks to go, delivery, that you don't include drink specials with that. Because I understood the part of this bill to also be helping all the back workers and the food people and all of that, and discounted drinks, I don't know that does that. So that's all I have to say right now.
Okay. I'm sorry, Cormac?
Yeah, so I don't think I'm repeating myself. I think maybe I wasn't very clear before or something, but let me just go. I don't think that we necessarily need a resolution, right? That's what I was trying to say earlier, is that it may be premature at this point because we don't have a revised bill and we know that this is not the bill as is going to be put forward, right? And oftentimes, you know, Robin Rothstein's on here. I used to be on arts institutions. Oftentimes on that committee, on many committees, right? Instead of resolutions, the committee just has a report about this is what happened, this is what went down, right? Without necessarily having any actionable item. And that may be appropriate for this moment now. I'm not saying we'll never have a reso, but you know, until there's something more to sort of to have on. Now, I'm not saying we can't have a resolution if there are points and things that we think there's consensus on the community board about that we want to put up there and things like that. But you know, it seems to me that from this meeting that we are under no obligation to come back with a reso at this point. You know, given that the bill is really sort of under construction, we just facilitated a whole meeting where they heard from the public and we, you know, it was feedback and conversation. You know, we may want to wait and see a little bit more for this to gel before we go in for another round of like, okay, well then here's what we think about where it is now. Like, let's wait for more drafts. Just my opinion.
Susan, you want to say something?
Yes, a constructive resolution at this point is not going to take a position. It's going to incorporate what we've heard in terms of identifying the issues that we want to see addressed, in the sense that a resolution is going to help move the process forward by helping to focus on those areas that are problematic and that, if not addressed, are remiss. It's remiss of our legislators to not address it. The second thing is a question. I don't see that there is a legislative problem with identifying population areas of above a certain size, in the sense that there is room for additional like local regulation, so that we don't hamstring the state as a whole, but in some way are acknowledging the unique problems that come from high density areas such as ours, in the sense that if there is a need for additional regulation, that maybe it should be permitted on the local level so that we can really craft something that does properly address the whole state. And is that possible?
Yeah, I agree with Susan in terms of the resolution. I think we need to explain what everything that we've done and have a record of what occurred. And then we'll let somebody else ultimately decide this. I can't see how we can decide something that hasn't been fully written and it's being considered. I think we need to give feedback, and that's what we're doing.
And we may have another resolution down the line when we have something more final. You know, this,
Yeah.
that we're not prohibited from that.
Yeah. And Dr. Smith, you want to say something?
Yes, please. We've spent an
Go ahead.
enormous, can you hear me?
Yes, I got you.
We've spent an enormous amount of time with this at this time and last time. I'm a bit concerned too that I don't think we need a resolution. You could actually make a report about what we've talked about at both of these meetings, and especially since it seems that this particular bill still is not final, that it continues to be growing, and being, changed as we speak. So I am not in favor of having a resolution about it until we get what hopefully will be a final bill. If you want to make a report on the outcome of this meeting, I see nothing wrong with that, just to outline the facts. Also, I don't think that we have, I wouldn't use the word an obligation, because Brad was on our board and it's our neighbor. I think we have I think it's important that they ask us, and I'm hoping that they've asked all of the communities, not just this one, for input. So I am not in favor of a reso at this point either, but you could outline the facts.
Okay. I appreciate that. I think that makes sense as well. Go ahead, Kristen.
Hi, I was going to actually make a comment that's off the topic of the reso, but I'll just add that I will add my voice to those who think that this isn't the time for the resolution, for all the reasons that were put forth by Cormac and Dr. Smith and Susan. So anyway, but my comment is off topic. So one of the issues is people congregating while the weather's nice, grabbing the drink and sitting somewhere outside. My understanding is the executive order is it expires in like October, right? So this would basically this bill would take shape right after that, basically in the winter cold months of New York, when people aren't going to go to restaurants, even if they if they're not opened up, they're not going to be going to restaurants. It's basically
the last 30 days. That's outdoor dining.
I'm sorry, what?
It expires in less than 30 days. I think at the end of July.
Yeah, end of July, unless he signs it again.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
It's an important distinction. So people, that's why I think it's important we comment now, because this bill, the second the governor stops renewing it, the executive order, then that's when this bill may come into play, which is why it could move fast in that respect, because I think that Jacob and Kendall had pointed out, the governor doesn't give any forewarning on his executive orders. They just come to be at the last minute. So the executive is not working with the legislative in the executive orders, since they have nothing to do with the legislative. And
Thank you for that
clarification.
So that makes a difference, but still my point is somewhat the same, not as poignant, but so the days will be numbered as far as the time that people would be getting a drink and sitting outside. And the time when this bill would be important is during the cold winter months, when everyone's still trying to get back on their feet. And, this would give them another option to get back on their feet, but there wouldn't be the issue of people congregating when it's, cold and 40 degrees out. So going back to one of the suggestions, which is maybe the bill's too long, the time period, at least, possibly making the bill go through the end of winter or something like that, that gets the businesses through the cold winter months, that wouldn't have the impact on the neighborhoods that it would during, or potentially have during the warmer months. There'd be a little period there, but we're already in that as far as some disruption. But by the time the bill expired if we had it expire, or if the legislator had it expire at the end of the winter, then that would kind of deal with that issue. And if it needs to be extended, it can, but at least that way it creates a shorter time period. Anyway, just a thought.
Thank you. Robin, you would like to say something?
Yeah, real quick, reso versus report. I'm wondering, if a reso is going to be sort of like too robust and a report maybe is going to be not effective enough, would a letter make sense? Sort of taking what we might put into a report into a formal letter directly to Brad, maybe CC the SLA or whoever, and that kind of I feel like that might have a little official teeth to it as opposed to a report, but also it's not saying we feel this way, that a resolution with a resolve at the end. But it gives I feel like it might give it a little more heft. But I was just wondering if a letter might solve.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up actually, Robin, after you spoke, is specifically that, and also I think that given everything we've heard, we might want to preface the letter with requesting enforcement of the issues that we've heard about, which are which is why everybody is so reluctant to support elements of this. And I think we should be clear with Brad that that's what's going on. It's the lack of enforcement in a appropriate manner in which that can be forced, given all the current conversations, but that's creating these big issues. I'm sure that, I know up in Chelsea there are other areas, the Upper East Side, there are other areas. I don't know where Brad's district goes to. I mean, these are just, these truly handful of places from all the licensed premises across the state are giving us significant pause when the issue is just the laws aren't being enforced. I mean,
Okay.
Can I?
Go ahead.
This is really a question for Jacob. Is there something in? I think there's something in here that says that the Liquor Authority is going to check in with community boards and municipalities after the law goes into effect, and then what? Give feedback back to you all, and will there be a reconsideration of the bill? Is that an ongoing process? How is that handled?
So I can speak to that. I'm happy to address that. There are 3 separate community input requirements in the bill. The first one is that the State Liquor Authority let me look up the exact phrase, but it's something along the lines of conduct regular outreach to municipalities and community boards to solicit feedback on the implementation of the law and the effects of the law on local communities. And then 6 months after the implementation of the law, the Liquor Authority has to report to the governor and the legislature on the comments they've received. After that, there's a requirement that not sooner than 4 months and not later than 2 months before the bill is set to expire, the SLA has to hold statewide hearings, one of which would be required to be in New York to assess, to take testimony and to assess the impact of the law. There's also a provision that allows the SLA to revoke a licensee's privileges to sell to go. And it explicitly requires that a municipality or community board has the opportunity to weigh in either for or against, the revocation of the license. Sorry, not of the license, of the to-go privileges.
Okay. Hopefully that answered the question. Okay, Cormac, you'd like to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I found the things that Robin and Carter and Susan were saying quite persuasive. And, you know, I mean, I just want to be clear. I don't have any objection to a letter or a reso along the lines of what Susan was suggesting. You know, I just didn't feel that we absolutely have to have a reso that takes a tough position on this thing and is very prescriptive. But, you know, if people, those all sound fine to me. And in fact, we could even have a tougher reso if there's some consensus on it and things like that. But I feel like it's not necessary, and we probably shouldn't go too far out committing ourselves when, you know, if we think about if this were an applicant and they came here and they didn't really have anything yet, we'd say, come back when you do, you know, so. But to Carter's point, if it could move fast, we should probably be on record with something, so.
Mar?
Hi, I was a little late, sorry, but did we discuss alternate forms of enforcement, right? Now that we know that the police aren't going to really enforce, is there a way that the SLA or I don't know, is there a body that could enforce? Is there an inspector that could go around and make sure everybody's in compliance and then institute a 3 strikes rule if they're not?
Yeah, I'll let, if you folks want to answer that question, that's fine with me. I think it was discussed earlier, but well, let's ask the question again. Go ahead. Hold on a second. Kendall, I don't know if you want to answer that question, if you can.
Sure, happy to. So, you know, over the holiday weekend, the long weekend, we saw that the governor put out a statement saying that he was diverting, you know, I believe personnel from other state agencies to help the SLA with enforcement over the weekend. So that tells us that there is capacity, you know, to divert some resources into the hotspot areas that are causing the most problems. So we have reached out to the governor's representative from the Manhattan to sort of assess where those people came from and figure out if that's something long-term that we could, you know, pursue as a, you know, additional enforcement for the bill's provisions. So that might be the Department of Health. That might be, you know, folks have said that there have been any number of agencies, city and state, represented in some way in enforcement of these provisions, right? So I think we'd like to figure out who was involved in that increased enforcement and then figure out whether that could be an ongoing arrangement.
Great, thank you so much.
But Kendall, just so we're clear, that would not involve open container law, right? The enforcement of the open container law?
It's kind of it kind of goes hand in hand, right? Because, you know, I think the governor had shown a willingness to make restaurant owners at least partially responsible for the areas in front of their establishments. And that's not necessarily just within the restaurant, you know, that's outside, and that has to do with congregating and, you know, potentially open container violations. So I'm not sure, you know, I would have to look into what exactly the bounds and limits of the enforcement agencies are, and sort of determine whether the SLA has any role at all in enforcing open container violations or whether that's strictly the domain of traditional law enforcement. So, you know, I think we'll have to dig into that and find out, you know, has SLA just been enforcing, you know, the letter of the to-go law, or, you know, are they also policing open container violations?
Although, again, you're writing a new law, so you could change what the SLA's mandate is if you want.
Yeah, fair point. You know, we can certainly look into that.
Okay, I think we are done. Unless somebody else has a question from the committee, I think we are done. The folks, whether we do a resolution or we write notes or facts as to what took place, I think it will be similar. I don't think we're going to take a yay or nay position. I think I mentioned that to you in an email before tonight's meeting. And so, you know, I'm going to do my best to incorporate everyone's views and certainly the views of the community. And obviously I'm going to need help. So, you know, when I send out the resolution to everybody, take a look at it and give me ideas. Okay. If there can be any improvement, we're all for that. And again, what it really comes down to is we're really providing feedback, which is what's being asked of us. So I just want you to put that in perspective, whether it's a resolution or how it's done, whether it's a letter. This is feedback, and so I hope everybody appreciates that as well. Okay, but Carter, you want to say something?
I was just going to say, just put in the chat a link to the SLA statement on the emergency suspension for White Horse Tavern, and also a link to the video of the hearing, just so people can see. They were actually visited multiple times by the Liquor Authority, and they were given multiple instructions on how to properly correct their scenario outside of there, including with the 6th precinct, and they just didn't listen. And so what you see now is the DOT is going out, and they are going out to outdoor dining spots and saying, here's what you need to correct. They've done some updated things. It's not to the point that people are looking for heavy-handed enforcement. But the problem is the people who aren't listening, we've kind of gone past that time period now. And so I think we may see a little bit more heavy-handed enforcement as we move forward on the repetitive problem places. But at the same time, so many places are doing a great job, you know, in their outdoor dining. And it's where the 311 complaints really come in, from the perspective of how the setups are. And, you know, when people make direct complaints to the Liquor Authority, they're definitely responding to them. It may not be in the fashion that we would like to see, but what the enforcement mindset, from my understanding, is not a one-off issue. It's the ongoing. And just to highlight, since we have Jacob and Kendall, I just wanted to share a picture that is, let's see, that was just a few minutes ago, underneath somebody's window, you know, just a few minutes ago. That's what the residents you're hearing from.
Where is
just the address is not specific. What I'm saying, these are the experiences, the people who are testifying. This is right now. This wasn't yesterday or the day before. And this is ongoing. And this place, I've been by this place multiple times. This is a regular occurrence. And this is why, you know, Kendall and Jacob, you know, nobody in this community is going to support this stuff as long as that keeps going on. And I mean, and that's the trade-off. And, you know, so, you know, and that's the frustration.
I can confidently speak for the senator. That kind of scenario is exactly why he put out that statement and why we contemplated striking the enacting clause on our own bill. You know, that's something that you will almost never hear a state representative say about their own legislation. And, you know, that, you know, as you all may know, Brad likes to pass bills, you know, so he, I think, is an active legislator, and really he's used to working toward chaptering legislation. And so when he threatens to strike the enacting clause on his own bill, he takes it seriously, and he's not playing around. So that situation is absolutely unacceptable. Like that crowd that you just showed is a danger to us all. So, you know, we take that very seriously.
Dr. Smith, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I do. And just in response to what Carter was saying, is that there's a restaurant, well, actually two, one on the corner of Bleecker, and I've talked about it in the last time we spoke, Bleecker and LaGuardia, and then one on LaGuardia now, that they've put their tables not only out in the street, but halfway in the sidewalk. And there is no way, I mean, for people who are with people with baby carriages, or people who have mobility issues, you have to walk around the tables. And of course, we know they are good actors, But I mean, that's just common sense. I'm not sure why they would do something like that because I guess they want to, you know, have more customers. But it's extremely inconsiderate of neighbors.
Yeah, and Shirley, when you see those things, if you can put in the 311 complaints, it really helps because they are responding to them. It takes them a little while, but they do go and visit them. And they basically have told us that the enforcement is responsive only, i.e. that there have to be complaints in order for them to be visited. It is not proactive, it is responsive. And so it's really important that people do put in those complaints. And there's still a time period where they're educating places on how they can set up. And I think we're getting weary of that. And we're hoping for, you know, people to stop doing that, right, Shirley? I mean, it seems self-evident, but people have got to put in the complaints.
Okay, I don't see anybody else's hand is raised at this moment. And I will take this time to thank Kendall and thank Jacob for coming. Really, really appreciate you guys coming to us tonight. And I think it was helpful for many reasons, but you got to hear what we've been hearing from people in our neighborhoods that are very upset with what's going on. You got to hear, I think, some pretty good ideas and why those pretty good ideas don't even work. So yeah, I thought I had good ones, and I kind of got shot down. And I'm a big time listener right now because you know, I think that's exactly what we should be doing, is listening and then reacting to what people are saying and whether or not we can actually make it so that, or fix it. If we can't fix it, I think we need to say that. So I want to also thank everybody else who was listening in tonight, people that are still here and that spoke tonight on this very important issue, okay? But thank you, everybody, for coming. And I'll leave it at that since it's...
Welcome.
What's that? Okay.
You're welcome.
And it's late enough, and we spent enough time on this, and I say good night to everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jacob and
Good
Kendall.
night.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
Everyone.
Good night.